Hey guys, welcome back to my new channel. Today we will see what if Harry Potter story. If you like the video, please leave like, share and comment and share with your friend. Now let's start the video.
Rose up to begin another day of her seemingly endless sixth year at Hogwarts, the year all her future plans had officially gone sideways. Her family had always walked a delicate tightrope, remaining as neutral as possible in the insipid and pointless wizarding wars over the last 2 centuries. The Greengrass goals were simple in concept but complicated to maintain: continue to enjoy the societal benefits that come along with upholding the pureblood traditions while simultaneously reaping the financial benefits of doing business with Muggles. It was her great-great-grandfather who had been smart enough to recognize the Muggle advancements taking place during the Industrial Revolution. Muggle processes consistently improved his ability to buy low from the Muggles and sell high to wizards not interested in dealing with boring non-magical necessities such as foodstuffs, clothing and building materials. Slowly but surely the business grew. And grew. And grew. The Muggles continued to advance as the wizarding world, if anything, stubbornly regressed. Muggle advancements were leveraged over the last 150 years to make the Greengrass family one of the richest wizarding families in England. Her family had hit on the perfect economic storm of consistently reduced costs with no need to significantly reduce their own sales prices. Her parents' plan had been laid out to her at an early age. Go to Hogwarts and be the paragon of pureblood supremacy outwardly but quietly. Carry yourself with impeccable manners and focus on your studies and leave the loud posing and posturing to the pureblood idiots that her family profited from. Whether she actually became proficient at magic for practical purposes was irrelevant in the big picture. Her crucial practical learning would take place during holiday breaks and through all post as her father imparted the real family magic, business acumen, emotional manipulation and knowledge of political relationships. So she would graduate from Hogwarts hopefully at the top of her class and join the family business, eventually taking over for her father. Her father's ultimate desire was for her to join the business and marry, in his words, a non-idiot pureblood. Knowing those seemed to be few and far between, he was willing to settle for a non-idiot. Ultimately the choice was up to her. No awkward courting, no forced betrothals, just a non-idiot regardless of blood status. As long as Daphne was happy, her father would be happy. Daphne eagerly agreed to the plan for 2 reasons. She was ambitious and loved a challenge, and her agreement meant her younger sister Astoria would not be burdened with any family obligations. Freeing her sister of those responsibilities was the least she could do given what Astoria was facing. Best not to think about that. Unfortunately for Daphne, the imminent war, to put it simply, had been bad for business. One need only see the lost shops strewn across Diagon Alley this past summer to see the impact of you-know-who's confirmed return last June. But the reduced profits were a minor short-term problem. The real issue was as war escalated, the demand for clear sides to be taken by proper pure bloods grew to a fever pitch. The number of business meetings her father was forced to take with respectable pure blood dignitaries over the Yule holiday break made it clear how much pressure was being brought to bear. Her father was skilled enough to deal with the idiots so far, but eventually something would have to give. Her family was in desperate need of another Potter miracle, her father's words again, not hers, to send Voldemort away, hopefully permanently this time. Hoping for another 1 year old baby to banish the Dark Lord did not seem to be the most prudent of strategies, and if the 16-year-old Potter really was the chosen one, he needed to stop dallying and get to it. She was broke out of her thoughts as a pillow forcefully struck her head. She turned her head to see her best friend Tracy Davis's annoyed expression. "You're worrying about things you can't change again, aren't you?" "Of course not," she replied automatically before another pillow made contact. "All right, fine," Daphne answered resignedly as she stood up. "I can't help it, and you know this, yet you continue with the pillow throwing." She headed toward the bathroom door before yet another pillow landed, this time to the back of her head. "What was that for?" she gritted out, too tired and too tense to deal with the nonsense. "Fun," Tracy said with a shrug. "Things are very tense these days, you know, and it's important to always have fun when one can," she continued on with a smirk as she pulled her hair back in a loose ponytail. "Now stop brooding and get ready. I'm hungry." After getting ready, she and Tracy headed to the Great Hall for breakfast as she always did, posture perfect, head held high and straight ahead, pointedly ignoring the glances of the male students which seemed to grow every year. It was a new participant in the staring that had piqued Daphne's interest recently. "He's doing it again," Tracy said quietly as they sat down and began to fill their plates. Daphne glanced up discreetly to confirm the he in question was who she suspected, the chosen one himself, Harry Potter. When she noticed his gaze on her the first time several weeks ago, she had been taken by surprise as he had seemingly never been interested before. Throughout her first 5 years at school, Potter had always seemed too bewildered, angered, depressed, or focused on other things to spend time sussing out pretty girls. On the rare occasion where he was distracted, he blatantly gawped at Chong. Most of his staring at the Slytherin table this year had been spent subtly observing Draco. Between her sister and Potter, she wasn't sure who watched Draco more. The most peculiar bit was that the looks he gave her were nothing like she was used to. There was no gaze of longing or of want, just a dispassionate evaluation of her. It was as if she was an arithmancy problem to be solved. Although she was loath to admit it, Potter was one of the few boys at Hogwarts she wouldn't mind looking at her that way. Was she really interested in Potter, or only interested because he didn't seem interested? She had no clue. Hormones were confusing. "Any day now, I reckon," Tracy muttered to her friend. Tracy's favorite pastime since the looks had begun was deciphering and analyzing Potter's motives. Daphne suspected the appeal for Tracy was twofold. Tracy was genuinely interested in what Potter was playing at and genuinely enjoyed annoying Daphne by discussing it ad nauseum. "He looks different today, like he's come to a decision," she stated authoritatively. "I predict contact within the next 48 hours. Suppose it will be in the morning, afternoon, or evening. Probably be smart to clear some time in my planner." Daphne shot back with a glare. "Probably evening, after dinner," Tracy continued, purposely ignoring the obvious sarcasm of Daphne's question. "Wouldn't want to be interrupted by classes or other activities, obviously." "Obviously," Daphne drawled as she focused back on her breakfast and attempted to change the subject. "So transfiguration this morning and defense this afternoon, right?" "No more than 48 hours, Tracy replied with a smile, ignoring Daphne's dodge. "Just be prepared for me to say, 'I told you so,' when it happens." "Well, it's nice to have something to look forward to, I suppose." "Let's go," she muttered as she quickly grabbed her things and stood to make the trek to class. She vaguely heard, "definitely in the evening," being muttered behind her as she quickly headed out. The remainder of the day was blessedly Harry Potter discussion-free. Snape even managed to refrain from any snide remarks directed toward him during that afternoon's defense class. Daphne had grown tired of the insults her head of house directed toward Potter in the first weeks of her first year. The fact that the professor not only persisted in making comments but that they actually seemed to grow in frequency and intensity over the years was baffling to her. Her only guess was that Professor Snape suffered the same affliction as Draco, Potter inferiority complex syndrome. PICS, for short. Draco was so affected by the Golden Boy it had become a running joke between Tracy and Daphne. Draco was quite PICSY today. If Potter somehow gets that egg from the dragon, Draco's PICS will be unbearable. I mean, I don't want Potter to die, but it might be preferable to Draco's whinging. Fair warning, the PICS is in full force downstairs. Avoid the common room unless you want a dissertation on why Potter is most likely a squib. While most students despised or merely tolerated Draco, Daphne simply felt sad for him. She remembered the nice, slightly conceited boy she knew when she was younger. Before his idolization of his father and his jealousy of Potter changed him into the prick he was today. In her mind, he was a lost cause. A harmless, annoying lost cause. In fact, she thought the only student who still had faith in the Ponce was her sister Astoria, who never quite grew out of her crush on the boy despite the despicable person he had become. "He doesn't mean it, not really," had been Astoria's defiant mantra whenever Daphne mentioned Draco's latest ridiculousness. "He'll sort out his priorities one day." Daphne smiled as she entered the Great Hall and spied her sister sitting down at the Hufflepuff table for dinner. Partially to avoid Tracy musings on all things Potter and partially because she hadn't done it since they'd come back from holiday break, she decided to spend the meal with the Puffs and, more specifically, her sister. Hi Daphne. Astoria greeted her brightly as she sat down beside her. Still worrying all the time. Shut it you. Daphne affectionately responded, I hear enough about it from Tracy, let's talk about something else. Astoria rolled her eyes and replied, fine. What's wrong with Draco? He seems, I don't know, frightened all the time. No idea Astoria, Daphne replied disinterestedly, I do my best to ignore him. Maybe he spotted a hippogriff and had flashbacks to his mortal injury. This is serious, Daphne. Astoria continued as her face became distressed. Something is wrong. I'm worried. Why can't you be normal and have a crush on Harry Potter like every other girl here? It would be much less disturbing. Astoria replied unconvincingly. I do not have a crush on Draco. I'm just worried because he. She abruptly stopped talking as her eyes went wide before she looked down at her plate and muttered. Speaking of Harry Potter, don't look now but. Before she had time to process the sudden change in topic, Daphne heard a throat being purposely cleared behind her. She looked over her shoulder to find, inexplicably, Harry Potter himself nervously looking at her. I think you dropped this in defense class, Harry mumbled as he handed a piece of parchment to her quickly. Daphne, he quickly scanned the parchment and realizing it was not her handwriting, responded. Sorry Potter, but this isn't. She was cut off from continuing by a quieter but more insistent reply as he leaned forward so only she could hear. I'm quite certain this is meant for you, Daphne. But I would wait to make sure until you are alone. It looked confidential. Daphne had always scoffed at the Potter fan club members when she heard them opining about his mesmerizing green eyes, but right now, as they stared at her merely inches away, she had to admit they may have a point. Okay. Thank you, he finally replied as she recovered her poise and quickly shoved the parchment into her bag based on his thinly veiled instruction. A relieved expression washed over his face as Harry replied with a soft, you're welcome. Turned around to assess who had noticed their conversation, and quickly left the room as his two best friends scurried to catch up with him with confused expressions on their faces. A million thoughts immediately raced through her mind as she purposely ignored the gobsmacked faces surrounding her. After a few minutes of intense concentration on her dinner, she finally risked a glance to the Slytherin table only to be met by the smuggest expression she had ever seen on Tracy Davis before she silently, slowly, mouthed, I told you so. As much as Potter's appearance at dinner had thrown her off, the actual message he had given her beat it tenfold. Daphne, I have a project I'm working on that I'd like your help with. If you are interested in learning more, please me in front of the Transfiguration classroom at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. For your own safety and mine, I need you to come alone. I will come alone as well. I realize you might be cautious about accepting such an offer. All I can say is I mean you no harm and really do need your help. If I had received something like this from a Slytherin, I would be suspicious as well, but being a dumb Gryffindor, I would have more than likely showed up because I'm bold, courageous and all that rot. I'm hoping you use your cunning and ambition to think about what you personally know of my actions in the past too. See that I have never purposely insulted or harmed anyone without cause and have always told the truth. What I need your help with, if successful, would bring great honor and political leverage to the Greengrass name. Yes, I am blatantly playing to your ambitious nature, but I am doing so honestly. All I am asking is for you to come and listen to what I have to say. I promise I will answer any and all questions that I can. If you choose not to meet, I will understand and will never bother you again. Either way, for your own safety, I would suggest destroying this letter immediately after reading it. I hope to see you soon. Daphne had ignored the advice given and had read and reread the letter at least 30 times. She wasn't sure why, as she had decided immediately she would be there. Potter had said all the keywords political leverage, ambition, dumb Gryffindor to pique her interest, and when reviewing her own observations of the boy over the years, she had to admit he really had only acted when provoked. Even the outrageous and unbelievable gossip about Potter revolved around him doing heroic things that were too outlandish and ridiculous to take seriously. And if she believed the comments that Draco had made about him over the years, which she didn't, Potter was nothing more than a fraud, an incompetent, harmless fraud. It couldn't hurt to hear him out. So it was at precisely 6:57 p.m. the next day that she found herself standing outside the Transfiguration classroom muttering, incendio, and methodically burning the note. Better late than never, she mused as she watched the final bit turn to ash. I thought I told you to burn that immediately, she heard seemingly out of nowhere. Merlin, Potter, she nearly shouted as she wheeled around to face him. Stop sneaking up on me. Sorry, he replied, not sounding at all like he meant it. I sometimes forget how much of an advantage this gives me. Her eyes were immediately drawn to the cloak in his hand. Is that an invisibility cloak? Yeah. He supplied without pretense. Shouldn't you be a little more, I don't know, discreet about having something like that? I mean, somebody could just be walking by and hear you. She replied before being met with a knowing smile. No worries. I knew we were alone thanks to this, he answered as he held up a piece of worn parchment. It looked to be an old map of some sort. Thoroughly mundane and ordinary except for the fact that some of the words were moving, and it looked like her name was there as well, right next to Harry Potter. What is, she began before being interrupted. Come on, he said in a quieter tone as he motioned her into an empty room nearby. You're right, we should get some more privacy. The number one lesson her father had imparted to her when in any meeting was to always be in command and keep the other participants off guard and guessing. They hadn't even begun to really talk and she had utterly failed that lesson as her head was already spinning. Pull yourself together, she thought to herself as she watched Potter place a locking spell on the door and a silencing charm on the room. Assume command, establish dominance, she told herself internally. As he turned his attention back to her, Daphne purposefully leaned back against the wall and folded her arms against her chest before speaking with her best glare firmly in place. This better be good, Potter, as I don't appreciate having my time wasted. Potter pinched the bridge of his nose and squinted his eyes in aggravation before speaking. Can we just skip that nonsense? He asked as he turned his gaze upward and stared. Enlighten me on what nonsense you are talking about, she coolly replied, desperately trying to keep up the pretense that she was in charge. He immediately mimicked her, leaning against the wall and folding his arms while fixing her with an exaggerated stare. This nonsense, he said bluntly before finally moving to sit down once his point had been made. Please, he continued while motioning Daphne to sit down as well. I'm not trying to trick you. Or win some sort of game of wits. I just want to talk and ask for your help. And I prefer to be called Harry, not Potter. Realizing there was no need to try and win a battle of wills when the opponent wasn't interested in playing, she finally let down her guard, giving a small nod as she moved to sit down. Nice to finally meet you, Harry. I'm Daphne. A look of relief came over Harry's face as he visibly relaxed and pondered what to say next. He took a deep breath and began. What I need help with must remain between you and me. Lives are literally at stake here. Because of that, before I share any specifics, we will need to make a blood oath not to purposely reveal anything we discuss or work on unless we both agree. Quote. Harry quickly raised his hand to hold off Daphne's outcry and continued. I know this is a huge commitment and I'm not asking you to make it tonight. I just want to talk and let you ask me any questions so you can think about it. It was obvious to her what this was about, but she needed to make sure. So what you need help with has to do with you know who? The one and only, he ruefully replied. So does that mean there really is a prophecy and you really are the chosen one? He asked. It looked to Daphne at that moment that the weight of the world had suddenly been placed on his shoulders. Yeah, basically, in the end it doesn't particularly matter because Voldemort has already decided I am, without hearing the whole thing, but that's all I can tell you without the oath. Daphne gathered herself, nodded and sat silently in thought, processing where she should start. Okay, she began. My first question is why me? I need someone smart who is strong in magical theory. He replied immediately. Clearly he had anticipated this question would be asked. What I'm looking for involves the design or modification of a spell. The idea I have I not be possible, but I need someone to listen to and hopefully validate and expand on what I'm thinking. I know that is where you excel, not necessarily as much on the practical side but in understanding and explaining the magic. I'm either naturally rubbish or too lazy to be good at that bit. That's where you come in. Daphne frowned in response. How could you possibly know that? We don't Avenue charms or transfiguration together, and you don't take arithmancy or ancient runes. Harry chuckled before responding. I'm best friends with Hermione Granger. I've heard all about who she sees as her main competition and you are a prominent topic. Strengths, weaknesses, she takes it very seriously. Too seriously. After soaking in the compliment, a thought suddenly struck her. You just mentioned you were best friends with Granger. Why aren't you asking her? You're right that Hermione, not Granger, has been a great friend, better than I could have ever asked for. There are 2 reasons I haven't talked to her about this. The main problem is she doesn't trust my judgment as much as she trusts Dumbledore's, especially this year. But she's not alone, the same goes for pretty much everyone else on my side. I've spent the last 5.5 years having everyone telling me to listen to Dumbledore, trust Dumbledore, talk to Dumbledore. There are loads of brilliant people trying to help me, but they unfortunately shut off their brain when it comes to questioning the headmaster's decisions. If everyone is saying it, maybe they have a point. Why not talk to Dumbledore then? She countered. He has forgotten more about magic than I will ever know. Harry's expression darkened. Daphne could tell he was choosing his next words carefully. I've tried, he wasn't interested. He has his own idea of what needs to be done, and he's been drip-feeding me just enough information over the last 5 years, the bare minimum he has to, so I will do what he wants. I'm finally getting some more insight this year, but what we've covered in the 4 months of term could have been covered in a week. He's not interested in listening to other people's ideas. He is so used to being in charge, likes being in charge. I think he's lost the ability to take advice. Daphne could tell he wasn't finished, that he needed to share this with someone, that he likely had tried to share with others and had been met with the "Trust Dumbledore" mantra for his efforts. Do you remember what Dumbledore said in 4th year? After Cedric was murdered, how everyone would have to choose between what was easy and what was right. Harry didn't wait for an answer before continuing, staring fixedly down at the desk. After my parents died, he has basically controlled my life, where and how I grew up, what I knew about my parents, what I knew about the wizarding world. He idly picked at an exposed splinter on the desk, never looking up. What I've come to realize is when it comes to me, he seems to always choose what is easy over what is right. Harry chuckled and finally made eye contact with Daphne again. Sorry, got a bit moody there. I've been working on avoiding that, but old habits die hard sometimes. I'm still listening to Dumbledore, learning everything I can from him and working on his plan. But I'd like to see if my idea is possible. It may be nothing, but I'd like to try. There was a pregnant pause as Daphne waited to make sure he was finished and cleared her throat to get his attention. Well, you weren't kidding when you said you were going to be honest. I'm Sing. I'm the only one you've ever told that to. Harry let out a snort and replied. You deserve to know everything if I expect you to help. Thank you. So next question. You've told me why you think I could help you. Why do you think I would? How do you know my family doesn't support you know who? Based on what I know of your family, I'm pretty confident we are on the same side, he replied. You do you. Please enlighten me on my family and our motivations. To Daphne's shock, Harry reached into his bag and pulled out multiple sheets of parchment and started rattling off facts. One of the sacred 28 families. I have no idea why that matters, but many people care. Parents are Cyrus and Amanda Greengrass. Neither parents have any siblings. One sibling, Astoria, 2 years younger and a member of Hufflepuff House. Based on my observations, she seems to be much more cheerful than her sister. Depending on which publication you trust, you rank anywhere from the 10th to 20th wealthiest wizarding family in Britain. My guess is it's actually higher once investments in Muggle businesses are included. Investments are spread in many areas, but the main source of income is from the importing of Muggle-produced goods to wizarding society. The family's pureblood status and heritage makes them the overwhelming supplier of choice, allowing them to charge higher prices than their competitors with little to no negative impact. Has never taken a public stance in any conflict unless they are directly attacked, which is rare given their financial resources and reputation for ruthlessness when provoked. It is suspected that they secretly provided funding to stop Grindelwald and Voldemort during his first rise to prominence, but it has never been verified. Has seen overall decline the last 50 years due to population reductions in wizarding Britain. The movement to eliminate Muggle-borns and half-bloods has not been good for business, meaning Voldemort is not good for business. And there's one more thing, you didn't wear a badge. Neither did your sister. Badge. She managed to get out as she struggled with information overload. The Potter stinks badges. He spit out before his expression softened. Fourth year was hard, the way I was treated. It meant a lot seeing a few Slytherins and Hufflepuffs didn't join in. Harry paused from reading his notes and looked at Daphne, who was staring at him, shocked at the facts he had rattled off. She quickly recovered and replied, Okay, you proved your point, and I am not less cheerful than my sister, well, only slightly less cheerful. How do you know all of that? You don't strike me as the researching type. Harry grinned as he replied, I may have accidentally on purpose told Hermione that I IED you and didn't care if your family was dark, that I could just tell you were a good person and didn't need to look into it. That's all it took to kick her into research mode. 3 days later I had a full dossier. Very Slytherin of you, but I'm not sure why that would kick her into action. Harry's expression turned warm as he filled in the blanks. Like I said, she is a very good friend. We have our disagreements, especially this year, but she is fiercely protective of me. In the past I've tended to leap before looking, so she wanted to make sure you and your family were trustworthy. You passed, by the way. Lovely. Always good to know I have approval for our fictional romance. Daphne glanced at the clock and realized curfew was in less than 30 minutes. As interesting as this has been, we need to go. I still have questions though. I'd like to separate the fiction from reality about what you've been up to the last 5 years. Can we meet again tomorrow night? Same time. Absolutely. Harry replied eagerly, clearly pleased that she hadn't dismissed his proposal outright. Whatever I can answer I will. You might find some of it hard to believe though. His eyes lit up as an idea came to him. Can you meet me in front of the girls' lavatory on the 2nd floor? The one above the Great Hall. Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. She replied with a shudder. Okay, but why? How? Would you like to see the Chamber of Secrets? It would provide a bit of proof to what I'll be telling you. Word of warning though, don't wear any nice clothes. It's pretty disgusting down there. She knew she was staring. Knew she looked a particular type of stupid, as she considered his words. So you're saying, the Chamber of Secrets, is real and in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom? Technically just the entrance. Like I said, hard to believe. If you think that's ridiculous, wait until you hear what was living out of the back of Quirrell's. On second thought I'll save that for another day. I think I might have broken your brain. Just a little bit, she squeaked before absently saying her goodbyes and heading to the door. As they parted ways she vaguely heard, I solemnly swear that I am up to no good, being muttered behind her. The morning after, the oddest conversation Daphne had ever had found her entering the empty arithmancy classroom a full 30 minutes before class was to start. She had made it a habit to arrive early to this class for the last 2 years, using the time for a quick review of the prior week's lesson. The concepts and way of thinking behind the art of arithmancy were so different than her other classes. The extra refresher was helpful to keep pace with Granger. With her pedestrian scores in defense, it was essential she excel in all her other classes if she wanted to keep pace with the Gryffindor. That Ravenclaw Pottle was annoyingly intelligent and ambitious as well. Her normal review would not be happening today, however. After taking her customary seat in the front, always exude confidence in the large and most importantly the small things, her mother had drilled into her head, she quickly pulled out a blank parchment and self-inking quill, setting to work. Harry had caught her off guard the night before. Although he had promised to be honest in his note, her years as a Slytherin and her father's training had taught her that it was at best a half-truth. He would assuredly tell the truth. He was a Gryffindor after all, but she had expected to have to pry the important bits out, to have to trick and charm him into telling her what she wanted to know. To engage in a manipulative dance to get answers out of him that he didn't want to provide. She could not have been more wrong. He had freely told her what she needed to hear to gain her trust. The 2 hours they spent talking flew by in what felt like a quarter of that time, and by the time they left, Hurricane Potter had won her over seemingly without really trying. She had expected a chess match and Harry insisted on playing checkers. It turns out he is exceptionally good at checkers. Since the need for finesse was out, she decided to be practical and simply make a list of questions for tonight after she saw the chamber. After she saw the chamber, she had repeated the words in her head too many times to count since last night, and it still didn't seem possible. She was sure the story of what happened in the chamber would be much more mundane than the rumors she had heard. She was very confident Harry did not have the head of the Gorgon he had slayed mounted over his bed. Just the fact that he found and entered the chamber was beyond impressive. Damn it, Daphne, she muttered to herself for becoming distracted from her task again. Stop daydreaming, she commanded as she set to work. Questions for GB. First year, did he really kill a troll with the sword of Gryffindor? Why did he and his friends win so many house points at the end of first year? Did he say something was growing on Quirrell? Second year, what happened? Is he the heir of Slytherin? Why did he try to kill Finch Fletchley with the snake? What happened to Lockhart? Third year, can he really produce a Patronus? Did he really kill Sirius Black with the sword of Gryffindor? Fourth year, how did he get away from you-know-who in fourth year? Did he secretly date the Vila contestant? Is he really soul-bound with the Vila contestant's sister? Fifth year, why did he have a hearing at the ministry before fall term? What happened at the ministry? Did he really fight you-know-who? What was the DA? Why wasn't I invited? Sixth year, why does he stare at Draco so much? She had just finished writing down her last question, why does Snape hate him? And was stowing away her parchment as a voice cleared behind her. She looked up to the smiling face of Hermione Granger. Mind if I sit here? She asked as she sat down without waiting for an answer. Daphne looked around the classroom and noticed why other seat was still available and immediately became suspicious. While she and Granger were cordial, even friendly with each other, they never sat together. Something was definitely going on. Ninette. Why minutes later her arithmancy instruction was finished and she could not recall one thing that was covered. She had spent the entire session waiting for Granger to do something, anything. To Daphne's utter confusion she had done nothing. No furtive glances, no notes passed, no hushed instructions, just a polite smile and goodbye, as she packed up her notes and left the classroom. Were all grief. Finders this confusing, or was it just Harry and the ones he hung out with? It's a funny thing about standing outside a toilet. If you think you may need to use it at all, the need increases exponentially knowing relief is so close. She had met Moaning Myrtle in her first year and had vowed never to visit this particular toilet ever again. A group of third-year Slytherins had sent her there as a joke and she was subjected to Myrtle. Well, there was no better word for it, moaning how unfair it was that Daphne was alive and that she was dead. She's probably in the pipes somewhere else in the castle, she convinced herself, as the insistent needs of her bladder won out against her desire to avoid the ghost. It wasn't until she was exiting the stall that she was greeted by the toilet's permanent resident. Come back to gloat, I see, she said piteously. Pardon, Daphne replied, attempting to hide her own displeasure at meeting Myrtle again. Gloating about what? The fact that you're still alive, of course. Well, you've made your point, so you can go now. She spit out through her quickly forming tears. Daphne rolled her eyes as she washed her hands and responded. As much as I'd love to, I'm actually meeting someone here. We're going to visit the Chamber of Secrets. I've got bad news for you though, he's alive too. Myrtle immediately stopped crying and became unnaturally happy. Harry is coming soon. The one and only. How do you enter from here anyway? The ghost became suspicious and glared at Daphne. How do I know you aren't trying to trick me? Daphne opened her mouth to respond when she heard a voice come from the doorway. It's okay, Myrtle, she's telling the truth. How are you doing? Myrtle's expression immediately softened as she responded. Hello, Harry. Why haven't you come to see me lately? It's been so long. Sorry about that, Myrtle. I never thanked you properly for your help in the lake, did I? Thanks, you really were a big help. If it was possible for a ghost to blush, Myrtle did. Even the dead have a crush on him, Daphne mused as she saw Harry move toward the sink. Harry looked confused as he spoke. I thought I said to wear old clothes. It really is foul down there. Her defensive nature kicked in at the perceived scolding and she responded without thinking. The words were out of her mouth before she could stop them. These are old. Some of us just choose not to wear rags on a regular basis. She immediately regretted it. My mistake, he muttered with a look of disappointment and embarrassment as Myrtle joined in the conversation. I don't like her very much, Harry. Why would you want to show her the chamber? He turned to Myrtle and smiled. She's all right, Myrtle, just a bit jaded. The smile vanished as he turned back to Daphne. Are you ready? She hadn't meant it, not really. Things had gone so well last night. She should have known he didn't mean his question as an insult. And no one would choose to wear the clothes he wore. There had to be a reason. She mentally berated herself for falling into the easy play of insulting someone to prove you are there, better. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Are you ready? He asked more insistently. We should get going. He waited for her nod, turned to the sinks and began to hiss. That will always sound creepy, she thought as she watched, to her amazement, the sink opening up and revealing an entrance. I'm really going to see the Chamber of Secrets, she thought to herself as the sink finished creaking open. Daphne tentatively looked into the new opening to reveal a massive, quite disgusting, pipe. The smell alone did not bode well for what they would find on the other end. She turned back to Harry and realized for the first time that he was holding a broom. You have two options, he began clinically. You can ride on the broom with me and I will do my best to avoid the filth on our way down, or you can just slide. Sliding is perfectly safe. That's how we did it last time. She didn't have to think even a moment before responding. Broom, she said while looking at the opening and making a face, definitely the broom. As she mounted the broom and wrapped her arms around Harry, the resident ghost interjected. My offer still stands, Harry, she said shyly. If anything should happen and you die down there, you are welcome to share my toilet. The shy SW. Eagerness then left her face as she frowned and turned toward Daphne. Not her though. She reminds me of Olive. Daphne had no idea who Olive was, but she was fairly certain it was not a compliment. Never fear. If I die I'll make sure to set up residence in one of the 7th floor toilets, much better view of the grounds. Smart, she heard Harry comment with a chuckle and she smiled, thankful that she'd been able to lighten the mood at least a little bit. Harry then turned to Myrtle with a smile to rival Gilderoy Lockhart. Myrtle, would you try to make sure no one comes in here until we come back? I'd really appreciate it. And if I, die, this toilet will be first on my list of places to haunt, with you. Daphne got the impression that this charm, this magnetism, came naturally to Harry and he wasn't even trying much. Myrtle responded as any girl with the maturity of a 13-year-old would having a 16-year-old Harry Potter flirt with her. The fact that Myrtle had been waiting over 50 years for someone to flirt with her only added to the impact. Her translucent mouth dropped open as she dumbly nodded and slowly floated toward the entrance, never taking her eyes off of Harry. With the ghostly guard now at her post, Harry and Daphne slowly began the descent down the pipe. True to his word, he did his level best to avoid touching the pipe. As well as she was certain she would never wear the shoes she had on again due to the muck and filth accumulating with each bump. There was a reason her parents had nicknamed her Princess as a child, and as much as she hated to admit it, it was appropriate. It was truly a new experience to fly with Harry. She had of course flown in the past, she was a witch after all, but she had always seen it as a means to an end. A pedestrian means of transportation. But as he guided them so smoothly, seemingly flowing through the pipe themselves, she understood kind of what all the stupid boys in Slytherin House went on and on about. It became flying when done like this. They eventually landed and she found herself to be oddly disappointed before quickly remembering where they were headed. Still a bit of a walk from here, he stated, waiting for her nod of acknowledgement before moving on. They had walked in silence for several minutes before he began speaking in a quiet tone. I live with my Muggle relatives. They don't like me very much, don't like me to have nice things. Harry, you don't, but she was interrupted again as he continued, stubbornly refusing to stop now that he had started. The Muggle clothes I wear used to belong to my cousin, they are his hand-me-downs. I think they make a point to only give me the most worn bits. He continued to stare straight ahead and kept walking. After so many years with no other options, I don't even think about how I look. I should work on that. I actually do have some decent things, the suit from last summer. She could take no more and grabbed his elbow to get his attention. I really am sorry, you don't have to explain. She suddenly found herself not being able to stop now that she had started. I'm so used to dealing with idiots throwing around insults and threats simply because they can. I get thrown off when anyone besides my family or Tracy is genuinely nice to me. I keep expecting for you to start in with the insults. She felt infinitely better when he gave her a small smile and nodded. It's no problem, glad to see I fall in the non-idiot category. It's early, Potter. You could be reclassified in an instant. So. She was jerked out of her thoughts at the sight of what looked to be a massive snake skin that stretched at least 20 feet. Please tell me we aren't headed to visit the former owner of that skin, Harry. Harry looked sheepish as he dragged his free hand through his hair. We are, but it's dead, and slightly bigger. Daphne's eyes bulged as his words sunk in. You killed it, I'm guessing? She asked dumbly. Harry seemed to quickly become uncomfortable and bowed his head slightly before speaking. Yeah, but it was mainly down to luck, if I hadn't had the sword. Wait, she cut in. Don't tell me you really have the sword of Gryffindor. Well, not anymore, he stated simply. I gave it back to Dumbledore once I was, finished. Daphne stared. Right, he finally stated after waiting for Daphne to speak. Shall we carry on then? She dumbly nodded, now dubbed the Potter nod, since he seemed to be able to cause it at will, and followed him down the hall. Neethi. R spoke again until coming to another entrance. Harry hissed an incantation and again the door slowly creaked open. As they began to file in the room, Harry warned, the former owner of that skin is just through here. As I said, it's pretty big. There are moments in life that fundamentally and irrevocably alter one's perspective forever. The moment she entered the chamber and gazed at the sheer mass of the basilisk was one of those moments. It was easily 50 feet long. 50 feet long. She had heard so many outrageous and outlandish stories about the boy who lived. She'd even read some of those ridiculous Adventures of Harry Potter books when she was younger. But none of them approached what she was now looking at, tangible proof at what he had done at 12. She shonk at a glance at Harry and saw he was looking at her, assessing her reaction to the beast and to him. He actually looked nervous, embarrassed. It was unfathomable to her. She slowly made her way over to the snake and broke the silence. So you stabbed this thing to death? It took him a moment to respond, caught off guard by the break in the silence. Yeah, you can probably see the stab wound on the top of its head. It tried to bite me and I stabbed it through the roof of its mouth and through the top. Actually got me too. Bit me on the arm. Daphne approached the head slowly. She knew it was irrational and ridiculous, but the sheer size and power the beast exuded made her think it could not be killed, that it was pretending to be dead and would lunge at her at any moment. Even Tually she made it over and saw the clear gash in the snake's head just as Harry had said. She also noticed that both eyes had been gouged out. The shock was beginning to wear off and the analytical part of her brain locked back in. They'd started at the end of the tale. Now it was time to start working back to the beginning. How did you do that to its eyes? She said, never taking her eyes off the snake. Oh, that was Fawkes. Dumbledore's phoenix. I was talking to Tom. Well, I'll get to that later. I had shown loyalty to Dumbledore and Fawkes came to help. He flew in and clawed its eyes out. Daphne suddenly remembered what Harry said about being bitten and slowly walked over to him. So far he had been unfailingly honest with her, but this part of his story had to be exaggerated. Basilisk venom was fatal, quickly. Unequivocally fatal. You said it bit you. Can you show me? Harry quickly rolled up his sleeve and pointed to a shiny spot of skin above his elbow. Her eyes bore into the arm, unconsciously grazing it with her finger. How are you still alive? She looked at him and he smiled, a true, genuine smile. It struck her that she couldn't remember ever seeing him that open and relaxed. It was nice. It was Fawkes, he was brilliant. You're right. I was dying, knew I was going to die, but he cried. Phoenix tears into the wound. Healed it right up. She noticed how much more relaxed he became when he was talking about the phoenix and not about himself. More ridiculousness. To gain the trust and affection of a phoenix enough for them to share their healing tears in such a way was rare. Virtually unheard of. Daphne wondered if Fawkes would be quite as generous with the tears if she was in need. She needed to hear it all, but one question leapt out above all. One she couldn't quite understand. She looked back at the basilisk and then back to Harry. Before you tell me anything more, I want to know why. Why what? Harry replied confusedly. You came in here, all alone, 12 years old. And fought that. Why? Why not run away? Why not tell the professors? Again Harry looked down at his feet, as if he was embarrassed at what he was about to say. Do you remember the message on the wall? Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. That was real. There really was a student dying down here. Daphne was struck again by how defensive he seemed. What he had done was amazing. Impossible to fathom. Why wasn't he proud, gloating even? Ron tried to come to but we got separated in the tunnel back there, where all the rocks were. And we read to get help from the staff but that didn't work out and we were running out of time. I know you are going to say it's stupid and it was stupid but I couldn't not try. Someone was dying. 12 years old, kept repeating in her mind. He did that when he was 12 years old. She always believed that she and her family were inherently good, that they always did the right thing when they could. But she suddenly realized that it wasn't true. They did what was right when it was feasible, when there was no risk, when it helped them. She felt like a massive fraud. Right, she muttered as she cast Scourgify on the floor and conjured 2 simple chairs for them to sit on. She waited for him to sit down before she continued, looking straight into his eyes. I still want to hear all the details about second year and all the other things you've been up to but I'm in. She looked down at the floor and continued on in a rush, vomiting out the words as quickly as possible before she lost her nerve. I want to talk to my parents. This has implications for my family. They need to know and I'd like to get their advice on the wording of the blood oath. But even if they disagree I'm in. This is important. If I can help I want to at least try. You need to know I am rubbish at defense though. If you are expecting me to protect you from a Death Eater or something you should best get to planning your funeral now. She looked up to see him staring at her, mouth open, trying to say something and utterly failing. It's nice to be on this side of the stupid expression, she mused as she smirked and waited for him to gather himself. He eventually recovered and cleared his throat. That's great. I mean really great. To be honest I thought this would have been a lot harder but this is great. Just make it worth my time Harry. You've been remarkably unlike an idiot so far. Don't screw it up. He laughed and quickly looked at his watch. We have 30 minutes until curfew. We can either head back and talk more later or we can stay as long as you'd like and sneak back late. She regarded him and folded her arms, pondering her options. Did you bring your invisibility cloak? He smiled and nodded. And that other thing, the parchment that you used the last time. Another smile. Another nod. Why not? I've just agreed to fight you know who. Getting caught breaking curfew seems like the least of my worries. Is it okay if we keep talking and risk it? Harry grinned and replied. Of course. I'm a dumb, bold Gryffindor remember. This is what we do. Daphne smiled in reply, a real smile. The one that was typically reserved for Tracy and Astoria. Excellent. Now since we've been talking about second year why don't we start at the beginning? Harry nodded his head and began. I hope you don't mind missing curfew by a lot because it is a long story. It all began in Flourish and Blots about a month before fall term started. They had already missed curfew by several hours but Daphne had given no consideration to leaving. She got the distinct impression that Harry had revealed very little of what they had been talking about that night to others, probably been encouraged not to. She could tell that he had skipped or was purposely vague on some bits presumably too important to reveal before she had given her oath but what he had shared was revelatory. EY were close to finishing up their 4th year and the stories had seemed to have lost the whimsy his first couple of years had contained. Funny stories about 3-headed dogs named Fluffy and flying cars were gone. Replaced by dementors, werewolves, unforgivable curses, and now, a graveyard. I had to bring his body back. I couldn't leave it there, with them. Harry paused and bowed his head, staring at the floor again. I should have known the cup was a trap. Shut up, Potter, Daphne interrupted without pretense, stopping him from heading down the path he was headed down again. Quick. Kay glance at her watch told her it was now 2:30 in the morning. She had heard ridiculous story after ridiculous story and at every turn Harry had taken great pains to point out that he was lucky, should have figured out things sooner. Could have done better, or had failed somehow despite facing you know who. Daphne had to stop and count to make sure she got the number right, three times a. ND not only lived to tell the tale but bested him every time. What you've done, had to go through, it's unbelievable. I literally would not believe it if there wasn't a 50-foot basilisk over there telling me otherwise. She took a deep breath and gathered herself before continuing. How had the adults in his life left him with such low self-esteem? He would have never lasted in Slytherin. She was suddenly embarrassed for Slytherin House. She had originally thought it unbelievable that he would ask her or any 6th year for help with so many adult experts literally right down the hall. Now she understood it. They couldn't be bothered to take him seriously or were simply too afraid. Before tonight she had never held any strong opinions about the headmaster. Now she despised him. Stop insulting yourself or the deal is off. Yes, you were lucky sometimes. Yes, as much as I hate to admit it, Granger and Weasley were brave and brilliant as well. That does not take away from the fact that what you have done is, I don't even know the word. She had been staring at him throughout her monologue, daring him to contradict her, but he had remained silent, his head stubbornly looking at the ground. Somewhat still embarrassed and unwilling to listen to the facts, she purposely paused, letting the silence drag out until he raised his head to look at her. Only then did she continue. I'm 16 years old and I only believe, really believe, in two things, my family and Tracy. Everything else, everyone else, has disappointed me. It only took you 3 days to make me believe in you, Harry. So shut up. Harry stared at her for a long time, eventually letting a small smile cross his face. Is it okay if I say something? I promise I'll try to not insult myself. Prat, she replied with a smirk and a nod. He suddenly became serious before staring at the damnable ground again. 5th year was really hard. I went to the ministry because I thought someone I was close to, my godfather, was in danger. It turned out to be a trick by Voldemort so he could get the prophecy they mentioned in the prophet. He wasn't in danger, wasn't even there originally, but because I was stupid and fell for the trap, he came to the ministry to help and died. It isn't fair. It's hard. When people die, or dying, it's hard to be proud or happy. They don't deserve. My sister is dying, she interrupted unthinkingly. She could not believe she was telling him this. Tracy didn't even know what she was about to share. If Astoria ever found out, she would be furious. She suddenly felt the end. To look at the ceiling as her eyes became moist and she furiously blinked away the tears. She hadn't cried about this since she was 7 and would not start again. The family was cursed hundreds of years ago. It had skipped several generations. We thought it had run its course until it showed up in Astoria. If she is really careful, avoids overexerting herself, doesn't have children and doesn't strain herself unnecessarily, she can hopefully, at best, live to the age of 50. Unfortunately she's like you. She tries and will be lucky to make it to 35. She chuckled and looked back at Harry, who was now staring, waiting for her to continue. She is so much better than me, better than my parents even. I think she is the only one in Hogwarts who somehow believes in you and Draco. I actually wore a Potter stinks badge, you know, just because Draco and Pansy wouldn't shut up until I put it on. I think I had it on all of 30 seconds before Astoria stormed over from the Hufflepuff table, calling me a coward and telling me she knew I wasn't stupid enough to believe you deserved that, glaring daggers at Draco the entire time. Then she went over and told off Cedric F. or letting his friends and the other puffs wear them. She was rambling now, but she couldn't stop. She'd only really been talking to Harry for a few days, but he was so much like her sister. He deserved to know how much she admired people like that, people who always tried. In public it was hard to acknowledge it. But in the chamber, a mile away from everyone else, after everything he had shared, she needed to tell him. It was so ridiculous. She was a second year at the time and she made me, Draco and Cedric, the Hogwarts champion, feel so embarrassed. And the worst part is she was right. I'm guessing 90% of the puffs hated her that year, and it only made her more adamant about it. She knew she was right and was so disappointed in everyone and so stubborn. I'm convinced if Draco LD spend half the time around my sister that he does around his father, he would cease being a dickhead, well, mostly cease being a dickhead. Good luck with that one, Harry responded with a chuckle. Draco has issues. He used to not be so bad, you know. When he was younger he was nice, a bit arrogant, who wouldn't be with a father like he has. She looked up to see Harry staring intently at her. Everyone's reaction to you when we got to Hogwarts seemed to smother all the good he had. Astoria said he wanted all the attention you got, but thought, thanks to his arrogant father, he didn't need to earn it. In his mind you didn't really do anything to get the attention, so why should he? Yeah, nothing, he muttered. Just grow up with 2 murdered parents and everyone celebrating the day they died. That's exactly what Astoria said. Daphne replied with a laugh. Merlin, you two are so alike. I really need to check her for dodgy scars. Harry laughed. She's much more cheerful than you though, too cheerful. Kind of annoying actually, she said, not meaning a word of it. The only time she's ever sad is when she catches me or my parents thinking about her condition. She calls us idiots and storms off usually. She sounds brilliant, he said with another genuine smile. I can't believe I picked the wrong sister. Like I said, she's like you. She wanted no part of arithmancy and runes. She could easily be top 5 in her class, but she hovers somewhere around the middle. If you want to be cheerful and read magazines all day, you can pick her. If you want to, succeed, then you made the right choice. Harry raised his arms in surrender. Fine, fine. I guess I'm stuck with the successful, serious one. That magazine thing is tempting though. Daphne nodded in agreement. I'll help you do important things like getting rid of you-know-who, then once he's gone you can hang out with Astoria and be frivolous. It will be a nice break for me actually. Harry's expression darkened briefly as his thoughts seemingly went somewhere else. Daphne decided not to ask what was wrong. They'd done enough sharing for one night. Suddenly the late hour caught up with her and she let out a large yawn. I think that's our cue to call it a night, Harry said as he stood up and made for his broom. What I need to tell you about last year should probably be done under the oath anyway. Daphne nodded her agreement but had one more item to discuss before they left the chamber. Now that she had gotten over the shock of the basilisk, her business training kicked in. UK. Now you could make a lot of money harvesting that basilisk. The venom especially, but the hide as well, they are extremely rare and extremely valuable. My father could set up harvesting. Absolutely not, Harry interjected. I need to keep a low profile. Escorting a bunch of people into the chamber to dissect that thing would just put more focus on me. If you could somehow magically transport Basilisk out of here without anyone finding out, I wouldn't mind. Daphne had expected that reply and nodded resignedly. It was sensible and smart. Maybe after this is all over then. It's a shame the house elves are loyal to Hogwarts. 2 or 3 of them could apparate it right out. She had just banished the chairs and was taking one last look at the beast when she heard Harry mutter from behind. Really? Really what? She could tell Harry was thinking now. House elves could really do that. Yes, but you don't want anyone to know. I'm sure Dumbledore would find out. House elves are always loyal to their masters. What if I knew an elf at Hogwarts that is loyal, really loyal to me? Could he convince 1 or 2 others to help and keep the secret? Are you talking about that crazy elf you mentioned from 2nd year? The one who tried to save you by trying to kill you? He wasn't trying to kill me. Just, injure me. Harry stubbornly replied. He just didn't quite think things through. He's calmed down since. He gave me the gillyweed for the lake after all. He paused as a thought struck him. He stole that gillyweed from Snape, a Hogwarts professor. Which would mean he's more loyal to me than Hogwarts. Right. Daphne hadn't connected the dots before, but Harry was right. It made no sense based on what she knew about house elves. That shouldn't be possible, Harry. If his master is Hogwarts now, then he should not have been able to steal from the school. It was clear Harry's brain had kicked in and an idea was forming. Hogwarts isn't his master. He is a free elf that works for Hogwarts but is loyal to me. Daphne was now becoming excited. Helping Harry for the greater good was brilliant and all, but this was something that could generate a lot of aliens and give her father a foothold in a new market. She had been taught by her father for so many years that she already knew what he would do with this opportunity, leverage the extreme rarity of the basilisk supplies by forcing potential buyers to switch purchasing their main stores to Greengrass potions supplies as well. Wizarding business was much like overall wizarding culture, reluctant to change. It was what had sustained the Greengrass family when selling Muggle-supplied items, but made it so difficult to break into traditional wizarding markets that they'd always remained a small player in. The basilisk venom could finally, persuade some large potioneers to change their main supplier. If Harry Potter was good for business, then her father would be more likely to be on board with his you-know-who plans. Harry, this is brilliant. Can you try summoning him? Harry looked confused. Isn't it a bit late for that? I'd hate to wake him up. With everything he had done, it had been easy to forget how little Harry knew about wizarding culture and behavior. This is going to sound really wrong, Harry, but just listen before getting upset and think about how the elf behaves when I explain this. She waited for Harry's nod before continuing. If he shows up when you call him this late, he will actually be happier than if you had called him at noon. She could say. Harry was about to interject and quickly kept going. Just let me finish. Elves are happiest when they are helping their masters. It seems stupid to us, but they are actually more pleased when they are inconvenienced if it is in the service of helping their master. That elf took a great risk in stealing that gillyweed. I'm guessing that added even more to his happiness when it helped you. She could tell Harry was reviewing the facts and the message was sinking in. She did not try to interrupt when he spoke this time. He always wants to punish himself when he thinks he has failed a task or made me angry. That means the opposite is true as well. When he does help or makes me happy, especially when it is difficult or challenging, he feels better. Yes, Daphne exclaimed, suddenly feeling less tired. You asking for help now should make him very happy. Harry nodded as he considered what she had explained. I reckon getting this basilisk to your father and making a bit of COI. Would also make it easier when telling your parents about helping with my project, right? Exactly right, Harry, she practically shouted. It was exciting to be talking about these sort of things with someone besides her father. Couldn't hurt to try, I suppose. Dobby. In an instant a groggy but excited house elf appeared. Harry Potter has called Dobby for help. She could tell the elf was pleading for it to be true. The elf seemed familiar to her, but she could not quite remember why. Perhaps she had seen him around the castle. He was now bouncing on the balls of his feet, nervously wringing his hands, waiting for Harry to speak. It seemed to Daphne that it was taking all of the elf's willpower not to hug Harry. Hi Dobby. My friend and I were wondering if there was any way you could get this, basilisk out of the castle without the staff knowing. The elf took his eyes off of Harry and looked toward the basilisk, his eyes growing wide. To her surprise, the elf then gazed at her and his eyes grew even wider as he suddenly became nervous. Dobby thinks he can help Harry Potter with the snake, but he stopped talking and began pounding his forehead with his fist. It was apparent to Daphne that Harry was anticipating this and immediately spoke. Dobby, stop. No punishing yourself, okay? Please calm down and slowly, quietly, tell me what the problem is. The elf stopped and willed himself to calm down. It seemed to be a very difficult task. He looked at Daphne nervously again and spoke. Dobby knows Harry Potter is a great wizard but is worried about his friend. Right, Potter's friend is a friend of Dobby's bad master. Suddenly Daphne remembered why this elf, Dobby, looked so familiar. He used to work for the Malfoys. That meant that the diary from second year was planted by Lucius Malfoy. Harry had been purposely vague on that bit, but it made perfect sense. She kneeled down to look Dobby in the eye and began speaking as gently as possible. I remember you too. You used to work for the Malfoys. Right. I'm sorry they didn't treat you very well. Harry told me how you helped him with the diary and the gillyweed. That was very brave. I don't think I could have been that brave. As her words sunk in, Dobby immediately began to cry. Merlin, this elf was emotional. Daphne glanced at Harry and saw he was doing everything he could not to laugh. Dobby is sorry. Dobby sees now Harry Potter's Greenie is a good and kind witch. She and Greenie's sister were always kind to Dobby. Dobby's bad masters were always nicer when the Greenies were there. Dobby was just scared for Harry Potter. It's okay, Dobby. Harry interjected. Daphne does know the Malfoys, but she is definitely my friend and I trust her. I appreciate you worrying about me though. So, you think you can help with the basilisk? Dobby's expression changed as he immediately went back to the task at hand, studying the basilisk. Dobby can help but will need the help of one more elf. Dobby thinks here is one in Hogwarts that can do it, but Dobby stopped talking abruptly and began nervously pulling at his ears before continuing. It will require Harry Potter's help. Harry mimicked Daphne's on earlier and kneeled down to look the elf in the eye and began speaking very calmly, very slowly. It's okay, Dobby. Just tell me what you need. If I can do it, I will. Dobby stopped punishing himself and became determined. Encouraged by Harry's words. The snake is very big, so Dobby will need another free elf to help if Harry Potter does not want the headmaster to know. There is one other in the castle. Does Harry Potter remember Winky? Harry nodded and waited for him to continue. Winky is working at Hogwarts but does not like being free. Dobby tries to help but she is still very sad. She drinks lots of butterbeer. She is not being able to help unless she is happier and stops drinking. To be happier she needs to have a master. Dobby looked nervously at Harry, clearly he was about to get to the difficult bit. "Go on," said Harry. "Dobby has told Winky many times of the great Harry Potter and she admires Harry Potter very much. If Winky were bonded to Harry Potter then Winky would be happy and could help Harry Potter at Hogwarts." Harry looked at Daphne, clearly lost as to what the implications of such a thing would be in needing help. She was happy to oblige. "I think your idea is a good one, Dobby, but to be Harry Potter's elf she will need to stop drinking and prove herself. I think helping you with the snake would definitely prove she is worthy to be Harry Potter's elf." Dobby was now frantically hopping and nodding his head, his forced calmness now gone and forgotten. "Dobby agrees with Miss Greenie. Dobby will talk to Winky and is sure Winky will want to help. Winky will be able to help Dobby once she stops drinking." Daphne tried to stay calm. Her father was going to be so pleased with her. "Do you think she would be able to help by next Saturday night?" Again she was met with a frantic nod and she gave a much calmer nod of approval to Harry to take back over the conversation. "Okay, Dobby. Go ahead and talk to Winky but make sure she knows this is a secret. I will call you tomorrow night for an update." "Okay." Another frantically happy nod. "Right. Thanks for helping and thanks a lot for coming to see me in the middle of the night. It means a lot." An ecstatic Dobby quickly latched onto Harry's legs in a hug and then unexpectedly followed up by latching onto Daphne's before snapping himself away. "Never a dull moment with you, Harry," Daphne joked as they made their way to the entrance and began walking back to the tunnel. "I suppose we should talk about the breakdown of the Basilisk proceeds. I would propose a 60-40th split of the net proceeds after the cost of harvesting. My father will be happy to provide an accounting of all the costs as well as the sales revenue." Harry quickly replied, "Okay," with a shrug, never breaking stride. Daphne muttered under her breath. She had purposely asked for a higher percentage than she deserved, assuming he would push back. Instead he just shrugged his blooming shoulders. He wasn't even being naive, he just didn't care. It was infuriating. Checkers not chess, she thought to herself. She stopped walking and spoke. "Harry, you're supposed to negotiate a better percentage after I make an initial offer. You killed the bloody thing and deserve more than 60%. Harry looked back with a confused smile on his face. "I thought I was the 40%. Daphne glared. "Fine," Harry read as he straightened his shoulders and pretended to look serious. 70/30ths and I will accept nothing less. If that's still unfair, just tell your father I purposely gave you more as a gesture of goodwill for helping me with Voldemort." "You are an idiot but you have a deal," Daphne said with a grin as she held out her hand to shake. She purposely ignored the fact that she was the idiot who negotiated down from a 60% stake to 30%. "Pleasure doing business with you," Harry said while shaking her hand. "So when can you talk to your parents?" "I will send them a letter tomorrow and see if they can come to the castle on Saturday to talk it over. I'll just tell them it is about a big business opportunity. Now that the Basilisk is in play it won't even be a lie. Then you and I can meet up Saturday night when Dobby and Winky hopefully can transport the snake. We can sort out the oath then as well." Harry nodded in agreement with the plan. "Just make sure wherever you talk to them there are no portraits. They tell Dumbledore everything." "Smart. I would never have thought of that." She had lived in the castle for over 5 years and had never considered watching her words in front of a portrait. Living a boring life had led to that carelessness, that would have to end now. Associating with Harry Potter was anything but boring. They eventually made their way up the pipe and out of the toilet. Harry made a point of thanking Myrtle who had dutifully kept anyone from entering while they were in the chamber. Harry even told her they would be back on Saturday, causing Myrtle to smile bashfully as she bid them goodbye. She was even nice to Daphne. Weird. As they made their way into the hall, Harry quickly pulled them under his cloak and pulled out the worn parchment, tapping it with T's wand and whispering, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." Suddenly the parchment sprung to life, revealing itself to be a map of Hogwarts meticulously listing the location of everyone inside. Definitely not boring, Daphne thought as they quietly made their way toward the dungeons. Having to study ancient runes before midday had always been torture for Daphne. As interesting as the subject was at its core, it was just so dry. It was crucial to anyone who wanted to gain a deeper understanding of magic, but a subject so focused on memorization and translation would always be a slog. Not getting to bed until 4 in the morning and then having to suffer through Tracy's smug interrogation over breakfast about where she had been only added to the torture. She could have sworn Astoria K.E.P.T. smiling at her from the Hufflepuff table as well, but she may have just been paranoid. She typically did not arrive early to runes, but today she had made an exception, in part to end Tracy's questions, but most importantly to have time to write to her parents. As it was now Wednesday and she needed to make arrangements to meet with them on Saturday, it was imperative that this be sent as quickly as possible without raising suspicion. She thought briefly about requesting to Flo call them, but realized any room with a workable Flo also most likely contained a portrait. This was too important, she couldn't take the risk. Harry knew better about these sorts of things and she knew she should take his advice. She had the feeling he had to learn the hard way and she was determined not to make the same mistake. After taking her customary seat in front, she began to write. Dearest Father and Mother, a remarkable business opportunity has come up for our family and I would like to speak with you both as soon as possible on how to proceed. I am hoping you will be able to come to Hogwarts on Saturday so we can discuss in person. Please reply at your earliest convenience whether we can meet on Saturday. What I need to talk to you about requires a quick decision and I would greatly appreciate your thoughts. Your devoted daughter, Daphne. P.S. Please have Father ensure he has a very large spa. CE available at one of our storage locations. If the opportunity comes to fruition, delivery may be possible by Saturday night. She mentally retched at the formal and cold tone she had purposely used in addressing her parents, but she knew it would ensure they would change whatever plans they had so they could meet on Saturday. She remembered how she thought it was a joke when her mother had sat her down the day before she left for Hogwarts for the first time and gave her explicit instructions. Your father and I know that we have instructed you how to act publicly, but never forget we know that is not you. If you ever send me a letter and address me as, Dearest Mother, or other such nonsense, I will know you will have either lost the plot or something is seriously important that needs to be addressed. Mum, you know I would never. Her mother stopped her immediately. Let me explain, Daphne. If you ever call me that privately, your father and I will be at Hogwarts in a flash, but not be 'cause we think you are becoming one of them. It's always a possibility, but we know we've raised you better than that, we know that you are better than that. We will be there because it will mean you need us and we will always be there for you in Astoria. So it's a code then? That I need something? Daphne had asked. Exactly, her mother had replied. Either you've started to become an insufferable idiot and we need to knock some sense into you as soon as possible, or you urgently need to talk to us and want to be discreet. Mum, you are being paranoid, Daphne had replied condescendingly at the time. Just humor your mother and remember, please, Daphne. Daphne had quickly nodded so she could get back to far more important matters. She had received her wand the day prior and desperately needed to get back to admiring it and imagining all the brilliant spells she would be casting in a few days. She loved her mum, but sometimes she just didn't understand what was important. 16-year-old Daphne smiled as she remembered how brilliant her mother was and what an idiot 11-year-old Daphne was. Her reminiscing was interrupted as someone sat down next to her. Her head reflexively turned to see Granger. Again. Brilliant. Good morning, she greeted Daphne without preamble and immediately began pulling out her textbook and parchment. Unlike yesterday, she did not give Granger another thought as she listened to Professor Babbling drone on about something to do with runes. She was too tired and too preoccupied with Harry's project to decipher what Babbling was talking about or what Granger was up to. Besides, in her few days being around Harry, she realized if Hermione was up to something she would simply ask. Daphne had forcefully learned that Harry had lost a patience for people who played games, and Granger had always struck her as someone who delivered her thoughts and opinions unfiltered. Also, she was tired. So tired. Daphne was pondering whether she should head back to the dungeons for a quick cat nap or go to lunch after sending off her letter when a tap on the shoulder snapped her out of her thoughts. Granger. Brilliant. I was wondering if you'd like to start meeting up in a sort of informal study group. Maybe Monday nights in the library. Daphne stared. She was so tired. And so confused. It was clear Daphne's silence had started to make Granger uncomfortable. And when Granger was uncomfortable, she rambled. I just thought it would be nice to have someone else to work with and discuss arithmancy and runes. My friends don't really care, at all, about that sort of thing, and I thought it would be helpful. As Daphne listened, sort of, to Granger, she remembered what Harry had said. Daphne and her family had passed Granger's test. Granger trusted her. Could she really just want someone smart and trustworthy to study arithmancy and runes with? Checkers, not chess, she thought before butting in. I'd like that, Hermione. So 7 o'clock on Monday. Great, Hermione responded. I was thinking we could do a quick review of everything we've covered this term and then lay out a study schedule to get a bit ahead of this year's curriculum. I know Newts aren't until next year, but we both know that isn't very far away and it's important too. Hermione suddenly stopped and looked nervously at Daphne. I'm sorry. I tend to ramble when I'm excited. It's just nice to talk to someone who is interested in these sorts of things, and I just... It's fine, Hermione, Daphne jumped in. I understand. If I tried to talk to my friend Tracy about arithmancy, she would probably jump off the astronomy tower. She did her best to downplay it, but Daphne was actually looking forward to it as well. Damn Gryffindors. Okay, Hermione replied with a smile. I'll see you on Monday. Despite her learned instincts, Daphne smiled and waved goodbye. Damn Gryffindors. It really would be nice to have someone to review the material with. Despite occasion allies sitting at their table with Astoria over the years, the Hufflepuffs as a group still seemed to be afraid of her, and as a rule the Ravenclaws were annoying. Besides Granger, that left the only other Slytherin in class as a potential study partner, and that was out of the question. There was no way she would voluntarily spend any more time than absolutely required with her. What are you playing at, Daphne? Parkinson. I'm not sure what you are talking about, Pansy. Daphne did not have time for this. She had letters to send, naps to take. I'm talking about your new study partner. She should have known. Well, sometimes when two people take the same class, they find it helpful to review together, as it provides a different perspective as well as valuable feedback on. Shut up, Daphne. You know what I'm talking about. If you wanted a study partner, you should have asked me, not that stuck-up Gryffindor. This was so tiring. After 6 years in school, these invisible lines were so very tiring. She and Hermione were only going to be studying in the library. She wanted to scream, if you think that's bad, I'm also trying to destroy your master, but refrained as that wouldn't be prudent. Best to go with the standard strategy. Insult. I'm actually hoping to learn more with a peer as opposed to teaching a remedial student. What? I don't understand. Exactly. Pansy looked confused. As Daphne heard muffled chuckles behind her, she looked over to see Bones, Finch, Fletchley and Abbott were still packing up and enjoying the show. They stopped smiling immediately when she looked at them and quickly left the room. Was she really that scary? She'd have to ask Harry. She turned back to Pansy to see that her confusion was now morphing into anger. She quickly packed up and began making her way out of the classroom. I have a letter to send. I'll see you at lunch, Pansy. Definitely a nap instead of lunch, she thought as she quickly made her way to the Ollery, ignoring Pansy's call for her to come back. Her parents' response arrived at breakfast the next day. Daphne's coded message for discretion had been received loud and clear, as her mother informed her they had not only made arrangements to meet her on Saturday, but would be taking her to Hogsmeade so they could talk privately at the Three Broomsticks. Apparently her parents distrusted Hogwarts as much as Harry. Daphne felt a knot form in her stomach as she realized this thing with Harry was suddenly becoming very real. As she made her way over to the Hufflepuff table to let Astoria know, she realized Harry was subtly watching her, and she gave a short nod to let him know they were a go for Saturday. She thought she was off to a splendid start at being a spy. Astoria greeted her as she arrived. Hi, Daphne. What's wrong? You got a letter from Mum and now you walked over here all weird. Maybe the spy thing wasn't off to a splendid start. Nothing is wrong and I'm not acting weird, Tori, she lied. I just wanted to let you know that Mum and Dad will be here on Saturday. They need to talk with me about some things related to the business. Astoria made a face. So nothing wrong, just boring. Yes, exactly right. Exceedingly boring. Daphne changed her mind again. She was very good at espionage. She grabbed a piece of bacon and looked back to see her sister now sported a huge grin. Astoria leaned into Daphne's ear and whispered, "Are you going to tell them about Harry?" Daphne choked in response and began coughing violently, drawing stares from those around her as she quickly grabbed a drink to help clear her throat. What are you talking about? She whispered back once she could breathe again. Tracy told me all about it, Astoria smugly answered. Ah, the other idiot, she was going to kill Tracy. Tracy has no idea what she is talking about. What about that note he gave you? And why were you out until 4 in the morning the other night? Fine. Tracy does have some idea of what she is talking about. I was out after curfew, but that has nothing to do with Potter. Daphne could save this, she had done a good job of denying everything to Tracy thus far. Astoria would be a little tougher as she was much harder to deceive, but all they had was circumstantial evidence at best. Then why was he looking at you after our owl flew in with Mum's letter? And why did you give him that nod when you walked over here? She was so bad at espionage. She stared determinedly at the table as she struggled desperately to come up with something, anything to say. She hated being this wrongful. Ted, and she hated hiding things from her sister. Before she could reply, she felt her sister's hand on her arm. Astoria was still smiling, but now it was warm and genuine. She began whispering again. I won't tease you anymore. I promise not to tell anyone, and you know Tracy won't either. I think it's really great. He's lucky. Daphne was touched at her sister's words in spite of the fact they were about her fake romance. She was suddenly struck with an idea, a very Slytherin idea. She needed to talk to Harry to make sure he agreed, but until then she would just try to play along without actually confirming or denying anything. Thanks, Tori, she whispered as she wrapped an arm around Astoria's shoulders and squeezed. We've just spent some time getting to know each other, that's all. We aren't dating or anything. We are trying to be secretive until we figure out what's going on. It's just really weird right now. That was definitely not a lie. Astoria nodded as if she understood everything. Daphne grabbed a piece of toast as she started plotting a strategy to deal with Tracy. She would give her the same vague facts as she had told Astoria and let her fill in the blanks. That wool tied her over until she could talk to Harry on Saturday night. The remainder of Thursday and Friday were relatively peaceful, which was unexpected. Tracy had been relentless in trying to find out whether something was going on, but now that Daphne had confirmed sort of her suspicions, she and Astoria had remained quiet. Despite herself, Daphne had to know why Tracy had suddenly stopped harassing her. She asked Tracy about it as they were walking to the Hogwarts entrance to meet her parents. Don't get upset when I tell you, okay? Why on earth would I get mad? Because sometimes you can be defensive and sensitive. I am not sensitive, she grit out, immediately realizing she was confirming Tracy's statement. Fine, I sometimes may be a touch sensitive. Go on, I won't get mad, but hurry up, I don't want my parents to hear. Tracy suddenly became serious. You worry so much about other people being happy. Me, your parents, Astoria, especially Astoria, but you couldn't care less about yourself. I think you actually look for reasons to avoid other people and possibly enjoying yourself. Daphne thought this wasn't too bad. Tracy and her family had practically begged her over the years to lighten up. Even her father constantly told her she had plenty of years to worry about the family business and could stand to relax a bit. I don't want to add to your reasons for not doing this, Tracy continued, her voice becoming quieter. So I'm not going to push for information, or tease you too much. I may have if it was anyone else, but given who it is, there are already going to be enough reasons for you to pull back. Astoria and I talked and we both want to help against the other morons, not be part of them. Thanks, Trace. Well, it means a lot. I don't expect you not to tease me at all, but I appreciate you trying, and not talking about it around anyone else. Tracy nodded. Of course. As you know, I can be an excellent Slytherin when I choose to be. Why continued their walk in silence as Daphne thought about how much her fake boyfriend was bringing her family and friends together. She really hoped Harry would agree with her plan. There is something though, she heard Tracy say in that voice. Tracy was grinning now, so Daphne knew the sincerity was officially over and it was time for the nonsense to begin. Go on then, Daphne replied as she topped and folded her arms, waiting for the idiocy to flow from her best friend's mouth. Tracy had been very sweet. Daphne supposed she could let her have a bit of fun. Does he really have that gorgon's head mounted above his bed? She couldn't help herself. Oh, it wasn't a gorgon, it was a basilisk, at least 50 feet long, Daphne replied nonchalantly as she began walking again. Fascinating, Tracy replied. clearly thinking Daphne was joking. "Didn't I tell you?" Daphne continued, "I met with Harry in the Chamber of Secrets. It was so romantic, except for the dead basilisk of course. Her than that the place had a real ambience." Tracy chuckled as she joined in on the narrative. "Did he really kill the beast with his bare hands?" "Don't be ridiculous, Tracy," Daphne continued authoritatively. "This is Harry Potter of course. He used the sword of Gryffindor." "Obviously," Tracy drawled before bursting out laughing. "I just told Tracy the truth and she didn't believe a word. Is this what Harry feels like every day?" she mused as they continued their way to the entrance. As she turned the corner she saw her parents at the end of the hall talking with her sister and unconsciously straightened her posture. "Time to make some galleons and terrify my parents," she thought as she made her way down the hall. As she made her way down the hall the knot in Daphne's stomach began to grow exponentially. She had been so preoccupied with everything else happening the last few days it was easy to quickly distract herself when she started to think of this upcoming meeting with her parents. She had told Harry she would help him regardless of what her parents thought and it was the truth. But even though she didn't need their approval, she desperately wanted it. As her mother spotted her, Daphne caught a glimpse of the warm, loving smile she seemed to save only for her daughters before it morphed into the more formal, public version. It took all of Daphne's willpower not to break into a run and envelop herself in her parents' arms and blurt out everything. "Not the time or place, Daphne," she heard her parents chorus in her thoughts and her resolve strengthened. She settled for slightly increasing her pace. As she reached her mother and they embraced she realized her head of house was there as well, lurking in the shadows for no particular reason she could think of. "Always with the dramatics," she mused as he gave a brusque nod to her parents and dramatically billowed his robes as he left them. She heard her father quietly muttering, "Git," under his breath and the knot loosened ever so slightly. "Lady G, Lord G, so lovely to see you again," she heard Tracy say in an overly aristocratic tone before dramatically bowing and smiling, really smiling. "Idiot," Daphne mused as the knot loosened again. After hugging them formally Tracy continued, "I will take my leave now, as always it's a pleasure to see you." The tone was meant to sound insincere but Daphne knew Tracy meant every word. Tracy unexpectedly pulled her into a hug as well and whispered in her ear, "Tell them about Harry. They will think it's brilliant, I promise." She nodded into Tracy's shoulder and smiled. The knot vanished. As they began walking to the carriage for their trip to Hogsmeade Daphne realized Astoria was still walking with them. Her mind desperately kicked into gear thinking of how to prevent her from tagging along. It was imperative that Astoria knew nothing about what she had planned. "Astoria, what are you doing?" she said as she stopped walking, forcing her sister to stop as well. "I told you we are going to be talking about business. You hate that stuff." Astoria shrugged nonchalantly, "I don't have anything better to do. If I go I can have a butterbeer and spend time with Mum while you and Dad talk about important things." Daphne noticed her mother was going to jump in but she quickly replied to prevent it. Astoria was too smart. She would figure out it wasn't a simple business discussion if her mother tried to help. She hated playing on Astoria's good-hearted nature but it was the only thing she could think to do. She grabbed her sister's hand and pulled her away from their parents and began speaking quietly. "Once we are done with business I was going to tell them about Harry. I think it would be better if it's just me there." Astoria responded with a small smile and nod. Daphne simultaneously felt a warmth in heart and a heaviness on her conscience but knew it was for the best. "Daphne helpfully reminded me that I haven't started my potions project," Astoria said as she looked back at Daphne in annoyance. "I think I better stay and work on that instead." As Astoria hugged her family goodbye Daphne suddenly realized what an excellent liar her sister was and how much better she was at espionage. As their carriage began to move she started to speak before being interrupted by her father. "Your mother and I have so missed taking these rides into Hogsmeade. Please indulge your parents and save the serious discussions until we are at lunch, Daphne." "Of course, father," Daphne replied, her father's message well and truly received. He mentally berated herself for being so impulsive. This was too important not to take every precaution possible. The 15-minute ride into Hogsmeade seemed to take an eternity and the stubborn knot came back in full force. Eventually they arrived and were escorted into their private room. As their food was being delivered, Daphne took a deep breath and inexplicably thought about Harry confessing why he wore such horrible clothes. Of all the things he had shared, Daphne suddenly realized that was by far the one that took the most courage. The knot remained, but she gained the resolve to stubbornly ignore it. As soon as they were finally alone, her father briskly moved to the entrance, placing a locking charm on the door while her mother simultaneously placed a privacy charm on the room. As her father sat back down, he spoke. "Please cut to the chase, Daphne. Your letter frankly terrified your mother and me." Daphne chuckled nervously and began. "First of all, I'm not in any immediate danger, and neither is Astoria." Her parents' expressions visibly relaxed and her father nodded for her to continue. "Time to get to the heart of the matter. I've been approached to try to help in the war, in defeating you-know-who. By Harry Potter. He hasn't given me the specifics yet without an oath, but in essence what the prophet has been saying is true. He is the chosen one." She quickly continued. "He has an idea that he thinks could end you-know-who, but he needs help with the theory and development. It may not work, but he knows I'm near the top in our class and thinks I can help with what he has in mind. I guess he's been paying attention to me and Astoria over the years, and he's done some research on our family. He believes in me, believes in our family, and is asking for my help." She what? Ched, as her father took a drink of his coffee before responding. "So you are asking for our approval to help Mr. Potter?" Daphne briefly considered lying and saying yes to the question, but immediately banished the thought. "Checkers, not chess," popped into her thoughts again as she purposely looked into her parents' eyes and replied honestly. "No, I've already agreed to help, but I told him I needed to let you know and hopefully get your help and advice." He agreed. She saw a ghost of a smile on her mother's face as she gave an approving nod. She watched as her father removed his glasses and methodically began cleaning them with his handkerchief. This was her father's habit when he was gathering his thoughts, and Daphne patiently waited for his reply. "I was a prefect at Hogwarts. Did I ever tell you that?" He waited for Daphne to shake her head no before continuing. "I was on patrol in my 5th year and came across a first-year Gryffindor who was also a pureblood. It was only a few days into term. He'd gotten lost on his way back from the library and was out after curfew by accident. He was being harassed and threatened by 3 Slytherin 7th years. Typical pureblood bullying, 3 against 1. Newt-level experience against someone who had literally just learned Lumos. Embarrassing." He paused to take another drink of coffee. They were calling him a blood traitor and mocking fun of his parents, telling him they were going to teach him a lesson, all the standard insults. I could tell he was terrified, but he just stood his ground with his wand pointed at them. His arm was shaking. He hadn't learned any spells that could help, but he wasn't giving in. He waited until they were done, looked them right in the eye and, "I'll never forget it," said, "Well, at least I'm not an idiot." Her father paused and smiled before continuing. "None of them had noticed I was there, and before he had said that I honestly was not sure what to do. I was on one of my first patrols ever. And I knew that I should punish them, but they were 7th years from my own house. I knew what I should do, but I was scared to do it." Once he said that, I realized how brave he was and what a coward I was being. I couldn't help it. I just started laughing. I eventually took 40 points from my own house and gave each a week's worth of detention. They were so angry with me, and I heard about it for weeks after, but I didn't care. If he could stand up to them, then so could I. They were the idiots after all. Daphne laughed despite herself, so proud of her then 15-year-old father. Her father's constant mantra to Astoria and her since she was a child was, "Don't be an idiot." She had never considered its origin, but now she knew where it came from. A thought suddenly struck her. Was it Harry's dad? Her father shook his head. "No," and continued. "Not James Potter, but you are close. I believe his son is also a Gryffindor in your year. His name was Frank Longbottom. Anyway, I walked Frank back to Gryffindor, and I think I became a bit of a hero to him. He always made a point of smiling and waving to me when he saw me, and we became genuine friends despite the 4-year age difference. We stayed in touch even after I was done with Hogwarts and really reconnected after he graduated, meeting every month or so to catch up." Her father made to continue, but his voice caught in his throat as his emotions seemed to get the better of him. Her mother placed a hand on his arm and squeezed reassuringly. The simple act seemed to be enough as he gathered himself and continued. "I'm not sure when it changed, but at some point the hero worship transferred from Frank to me. He became an Auror right out of school and was in a secret organization dedicated to fighting you-know-who. Ween. Veer we'd meet he would mention how much my family's public support would help the cause and I always said I would think about it. Eventually he gave up asking. He never said anything but I could tell how disappointed he was with me. Then the Potter miracle happened. Your mother and I were so relieved and I patted myself on the back for being smart enough to stay out of it. We didn't know the Potters very well and to my shame my joy at the war being over made their deaths almost an afterthought. Her father paused again and Daphne was struck by how old her father suddenly looked. This all happened on October 31st and we were supposed to meet Frank and his wife Alice for lunch on November 2nd. I could not wait for that lunch to celebrate with them and have the chance to talk about anything but the war again. But they never showed up. Daphne had never seen her father cry but she could tell he was precipitously close. She had never seen him look so lost, so vulnerable. Whatever she had expected out of this discussion it was not this. She wondered if she should say something to break the silence when her mother took over the story. Frank and his wife were attacked by Death Eaters the day after you-know-who was defeated. They were angry and took it out on the Longbottoms because they publicly defied you-know-who. They tortured them to insanity using the Cruciatus curse in front of their son Neville. It was senseless and horrific, the ultimate act of cowardice. They are still alive at St. Mungo's but their minds are gone. Suddenly something clicked for Daphne. That's where you go every year on November 2nd. St. Mungo's. Her mother waited to see if her father would reply. When he remained silent she continued. We always go to Florine Fortescue's first. Alice always had a bit of a sweet tooth and it was her favorite place for us to meet as couples, then we visit them at the hospital. Daphne immediately thought about Neville Longbottom and the insults he had absorbed from her housemates and most especially from Professor Snape over the years. She vaguely wondered if it was possible to be resorted as a sixth year. Her father suddenly joined back in the conversation, the steel and resolve having returned to his voice. You promise you will be smart and do your best to avoid any risks? Yes sir, she replied. And you will keep Astoria out of this as well? Absolutely, she answered with a nod. Good. Now tell me how your mother and I can help. The next 2 hours were spent with Daphne detailing the conversations she had had so far with Harry, purposely avoiding anything she thought Harry may not want shared. They had finished working out the proper wording for the blood oath when her father spoke. Excellent. Now please tell me why I spent all day yesterday emptying a warehouse. Daphne smiled and made a mental note to save her parents' reactions as a pensive memory later. If all goes well 2 house elves will be delivering a basilisk to you tonight. You're serious? Yes sir. Quote. How large? About 50 feet. You've seen it? Yes sir. And it's dead how? Harry killed it. When he was 12. With the sword of Gryffindor. Right. Her father muttered before quickly leaving the room. Her mother remained silent, processing Daphne's news. Her father eventually returned with a bottle of fire whiskey and 3 glasses. Daphne watched as he poured 2 glasses and her parents quickly downed the contents. What are the agreed upon terms? We keep 30% of the net revenue after expenses of harvesting and distribution. Her mother interjected. That is very generous of Mr. Potter given that he actually killed it. She shook her head disbelievingly before continuing. Are you taking advantage of the situation, Daphne? Daphne shook her head and decided not to share that the family's original stake was 60% before she talked Harry down. Harry is aware. He agreed to the higher percentage as a gesture of goodwill for helping with you-know-who. Her mother continued. How long have you been talking to Mr. Potter? The question confused Daphne but she answered. Since last Sunday. Based on your expression when talking about the boy you seem to have grown quite fond of him. Daphne purposely looked down at the table as she answered. What you shared about the Longbottoms, why you admired them, it's the same reason why I need to help Harry. He has been through so much, there is so much that I haven't shared that he has done, so many times he has fought when he had no chance of success but did it anyway. He's brilliant, but for some reason still thinks he's an idiot. It only makes him more brilliant. She looked up to see both of her parents smiling back at her and her heart lightened, the knot in her stomach long gone and forgotten. Her father waited for his wife's nod of approval before speaking. Please tell Mr. Potter that we will be happy to help him in any way we can. If we are required to take a blood oath, As well then we are both more than willing. Daphne quickly wiped away the tears that were forming as she nodded her thanks. Her parents were brilliant. Her father then refilled the 2 glasses and filled the 3rd glass as well, handing it to Daphne with a smile. Now that we've been properly brave, let's talk more about this basilisk. As Daphne waited for Harry outside Myrtle's toilet, she did her best to process the last few hours. Her parents were not at all furious with her decision to help Harry, and they had even pledged their equal support. She had anticipated having to spend at least an hour or 2 convincing them that she hadn't lost her mind, but it in fact had taken mere minutes. The rest of the afternoon was spent talking about what she knew and strategizing how best to work with Harry within the walls of Hogwarts. Her father and mother were originally dubious, but ultimately both agreed with her strategy. The look her mother gave her when she was explaining it was a bit disconcerting, but she quickly dismissed it. Now the hard bit would be convincing Harry. Her mind kept returning to what her father said as he gave her a slightly less formal and more emotional embrace than normal when they said goodbye. Your mother and I always thought Tori was the bravest of us and chalked it up to her having less to lose given her condition. We're pleased to see you've proved us wrong. They had spent so long together strategizing she barely had enough time to get back to Hogwarts and change into her worst clothes for the return trip to the chamber. Unlike last time, she really did wear the worst things she had. Last time her ego hadn't allowed her to look this rundown, now she felt stupid for ever worrying about such a thing. As she spotted Harry walking towards her, she could tell he was nervous. Probably worried about how the meeting with her parents had gone. He was truly awful at hiding his emotions. She thought she could help him with that, then wondered if she wanted to. It was quite endearing. Maybe she could help him a bit for when he spoke to everyone else. Without a word they entered the toilet as she saw him stow away his remarkable map. After a brief conversation with Myrtle, where the ghost had been slightly more pleasant, Daphne found herself quickly at the bottom of the pipe and walking side by side with Harry. She could tell he was hesitant to ask how her parents reacted, so she began speaking straight away. The meeting with my parents was brilliant. They were a bit shocked but weren't upset at all. They were actually proud of me and gave me a lot of good input. She quieted, anticipating a response from Harry. When he remained silent, she went on. They offered to help you in any way they can. They even volunteered to take a blood oath as well to keep your secrets. She again waited for a response but again was met with silence. After a few moments she realized Harry was no longer walking beside her. She stopped and turned to I am 10 feet behind her, standing dead still. Just like that, he finally blurted out. Just like what? He shrugged and continued. When you told me you wanted to tell your parents, I understood but thought they'd be furious. They really want to help. Is it that hard to believe people would follow you? You led that defense group last year, right? The OWL results they received compared to mine made me furious, if I'm being honest. And Hermione and Weasley seem to do everything they can to help as well. Harry recovered a bit of his senses and smiled. You're calling her Hermione now. That's beside the point, she shot back. We're getting off topic. Answer the question. Harry began walking again and responded, his gaze looking straight ahead. It's just, there are people that believe in me to do the right thing, and I guess they think I'm magically powerful. They just don't always listen to my ideas. I'm not used to it. They really want to help. You are far too humble, Harry. You are dealing with 3 Slytherins now, at least pretend that you know what you are doing. Harry laughed at her joke but remained silent. Daphne continued on. I told you the other night I believe in you and want to help, and my parents believe in me. She paused to let Harry open the chamber before continuing. Finding out you killed that thing at the age of 12 helped them believe as well. Also defeating you know who when you were 11, driving off 100 Dementors, outflying a dragon, outdueling you know who, and escaping after being under the Cruciatus. All right, I'm brilliant, let's move on. He kept his head down but Daphne could see he was smiling. Ready to call our house elf friends. He waited for her nod and continued. Harry had barely finished saying Dobby's name before the 2 house elves popped in. Daphne imagined they had been sitting together for the entire day waiting to be called. Dobby and Winky are ready to help Harry Potter and Miss Greenie. Dobby exclaimed as Winky nervously nodded her head behind him, seemingly more afraid of Harry than the basilisk. Harry noticed the female house elf's nerves and addressed her. Are you alright, Winky? You look a bit peaky. Daphne wasn't sure what qualified as peaky amongst house elves. Winky tentatively replied. Winky is being good. Winky hasn't had any butterbeer for 4 days. Winky is wanting to be Harry Potter's elf and is just being scared she will fail. Harry leaned in and whispered to Daphne while smiling at the elves. I have no clue with girls, let alone female house elves. Help me out here, she whispered back. She doesn't care what I have to say, she wants to be bonded with you. Just be encouraging or something. Harry processed her advice and kneeled down until he was at eye level with the elf. Would it help if we bonded before you take the basilisk? I want you to be my elf even if this doesn't work. Winky stared at Harry while Dobby immediately cried out, Harry Potter is a great wizard. And burst into tears. Please calm down, Dobby, and tell me what I need to do, Harry begged. Winky already be doing it, Master Potter. Winky interjected. When Master Potter says he is wanting to be bonded, Winky bonded. Daphne noted the fear and nervousness in Winky had disappeared. Winky and Dobby be taking Basilisk right away. She practically shouted. Where's show? LD Winky be going after Snake is being delivered. Harry looked as if he wanted to fly out of the chamber immediately. Thankfully her father had anticipated this and had given her advice on how to handle it. She cleared her throat to get Harry's attention and spoke. Now that she's bonded to someone, she can't stay at Hogwarts. If you'd like, she can stay and work with my family until summer when you aren't at the school. She waited for Harry to respond. Yeah, that's good. I'm really glad I asked you and your family for help. Don't forget it, Potter, she replied before turning to address the elves. If I think of where the basilisk needs to go, will you be able to get it from my mind? If Miss Greenie gives permission to Dobby and Winky, Dobby replied while Winky smiled and continued to stare at Harry. She quickly gave her permission and the elves were ready to go. Daphne pulled at Harry's elbow and kneeled down to Winky, bringing Harry with her. My father, Cyrus Greengrass, will be there when you deliver the basilisk, Winky. You can go home with my family and help them while Harry is at school. If they ask you to do anything you believe Harry wouldn't want you to do, just tell them all right. Winky smiled and began staring at Harry again. Yes, what she said. And welcome to the family. Yes, Master Potter, Winky beamed as she sprinted over to the basilisk. The house elves quickly disappeared with the beast. Daphne burst out laughing. Welcome to the family. He tried to look mad but a smile was stubbornly breaking through. It seemed appropriate at the time. I told you I'm clueless with girls, the house elf bit just made it worse. She playfully nudged him on the shoulder. Just teasing, Harry. You made her feel wanted and valuable, it was well done. A bit corny but well done. I'm going to ignore the corny bit and focus on you saying it was well done twice, Harry replied, smiling slightly and looking her in the eye. Daphne was pleased to see him not staring at his feet when accepting her compliment and felt a vague bit of accomplishment. Just remember to call her every so often and ask her to help you with something. Picking up something from Diagon Alley. Organizing your trunk, just something so she knows you need her. Brilliant, Daphne. I would have never thought of that. Thanks. Daphne smiled and stubbornly resisted the urge to look at her feet. They made a good team. She briefly lost herself in those thoughts before Harry's voice broke through. So, the oath. Right, Daphne replied as her mind kicked into gear and pulled out a parchment. I came up with the wording with my family this afternoon. You'll see there are notes below what we came up with explaining what is covered and what is not. She handed the parchment over and nervously continued. This is just a starting point. We can talk about whatever you'd like to change. In fact, if you don't ask any questions or make any suggestions, I've learned a spell to box your ears. Harry laughed and gave her a mock salute before starting to read. She could see by his expression he was intensely focused on the parchment. It was a bit unnerving. She was pleasantly surprised when he pulled out his own bit of parchment and began making notes. Finally he finished and began to speak. So the main bit is that the only things covered under the oath are he things we specifically cite before or after sharing. Daphne nodded. So I could tell you something stupid, like my favorite dessert is treacle tart. If I said I wanted it covered under the oath hen you couldn't share it even though it's pointless information. Exactly right, she enthused. He really was much sharper than he let on in class. Daphne continued on, doing her best to parrot her father's explanation. As long as one of us specifically says it's confidential, then it's covered. This will make it much harder to find a loophole than if it's specific to one thing only. My great GR and father once made an oath with a business partner that was specific to the deal they were working on. The partner didn't share anything regarding the deal but did sell the things he had learned about my family's business to our main competitors. And if we share something but forget to mention it's under the oath at first, we can mention it later and it's covered from that point on. Right, Daphne stated. If it was shared with someone else before the correction, it obviously isn't covered, but after that it's included. Okay, I've just one more question. What if one of us makes a mistake? What? Back to the treacle tart. What if you forgot that was covered and you mentioned to your sister that it was my favorite? What happens? The question confused her as the answer was obvious. And I would have broken the oath and would have to suffer the consequences. Harry began shaking his head, suddenly becoming agitated. She had discussed so many potential changes with her parents, but this did not come up. Daphne was flummoxed. Harry, that's the whole point. If we agree to this, then we can't break it. We'll need to come up with something else or call it off then. I won't have you being punished for making a mistake. And then it clicked. She had been thinking about and discussing strategies focused only on protecting herself and punishing the other party if they failed. Daphne suddenly realized Harry was worried about her welfare as much as his own, maybe even more so. Of course. So you'd like the oath to be focused solely on intent then? We have to knowingly break the oath. Exactly. Harry cut in. We can just add the word, knowingly, in right. That will work. The implications for such a change were massive. She had to really put her trust in Harry not being careless. Slytherin Daphne was waving her hands wildly, pantomiming the word, no, in her consciousness. She looked at Harry and, Hufflepuff Daphne, emerged, smiling and nodding her head reassuringly. Yeah, that should work. Let's do it. Great. Let's do it then, Daphne, Harry replied with a look of relief. Very quickly the oath was done and Harry looked a bit confused. Everything all right there, Harry? A bemused expression took over. Yeah, just seemed a bit anticlimactic, you know. I was expecting a gong or clanging bells of doom. Wizards are usually so dramatic, with a name like Blood Oath. I thought we'd get some ominous warning once it was done. It actually felt nice. Warm. Daphne had felt the same thing. She imagined it was because their oath was made with a focus on the other party's welfare as well. She suddenly felt the warmth again and smiled internally. That was too intimate to share though. She went with the explanation her mother had shared. Yeah, Mum once told me that sort of thing is based on the wizards behind the magic. Something about wizards valuing their worth based on the size of their wands. I imagine an oath with Professor Snape would involve a swarm of bats or some other nonsense. Her comment caused Harry to chuckle, eventually growing into a full-out laugh. I was just thinking about the theatrics of the Goblet of Fire. It all makes sense now. Dumbledore is such a drama queen. Daphne smiled and suddenly became nervous, remembering there was one more thing to talk about before they proceeded. We need to decide how we are going to work together. I originally thought we could meet in secret, but I don't think that's going to work. Tracy and Astoria have already sussed out there is something going on and I am rubbish at lying. The more I do it, the more they will suspect something is going on. Harry nodded in agreement. Yeah, Ron's clueless, so no worries there, but Hermione already knows something is going on as well. It's my own fault really. I told her I fancied you and now I've gone missing a couple of times this week, which she of course noticed. She saw you nodding at me this morning and couldn't stop smiling at me all afternoon. She's well chuffed for me. It's going to be a shame when I tell her we aren't dating. It was now or never. What if you didn't? She looked at Harry and saw he was staring at her, waiting for her to continue. She quickly trudged on. Astoria and Tracy think the same thing already as well. What if we pretend to be a couple? Our friends already believe it and are happy about it, and it gives us a built-in excuse to spend time together without them around. If everyone else thinks it, we won't even need to sneak around and meet. We can work together in the library if we want, as long as we use a privacy spell. If we ever do need privacy and get caught, everyone will just assume we're snogging or something. She waited and watched as Harry processed her idea. He hadn't burst out into laughter immediately, so that was good. That's actually a really good idea, but will people believe we would date each other? Her immediate instinct was to lash back with an insult. If anyone else implied she wasn't worthy enough to date, her response would have been swift and cutting. But this was Harry. She took a breath. Explain, she spat out, purposely pushing down her defensive nature. Harry looked gobsmacked. Isn't it obvious? You are massively out of my league. You're rich, an heiress to one of the sacred 28, smart and beautiful. The last word was said hesitantly. It was now Daphne's turn at being gobsmacked. Harry continued. I mean, I'm not an idiot. I know a lot of girls fancy me, but it's mainly down to the boy who lived, chosen one, nonsense. You'd never fall for that rubbish. She should have known. You're wrong, Harry. Right now you are most definitely an idiot. She could tell he was going to respond but stopped him before he could start. Just shut up and let me finish. Daphne paused and tried to explain without really explaining. Tracy and Astoria know me better than anyone. They are as excited as Hermione is with the prospect of us dating. And they couldn't care less about you being the boy who lived. If they think you're brilliant and that we're well matched, then that's good enough for me. Even if some people are stupid enough to I'm out of your league, they'll just think I'm using you, which is fine. I'm the cunning Slytherin taking advantage of your celebrity, and you're the noble Gryffindor who wants to think the best of everyone. It fits right in with their narrative. Might as well use it to our advantage. Daphne could tell he was considering her words in the same way he had pored over her notes on the blood oath. Eve. Surely his expression changed into a smirk. I suppose I could do worse for a fake girlfriend. If you're game, then so am I. Idiot, Daphne muttered as she smiled despite her best intentions. So shish. We make it official and meet tomorrow afternoon in the library around 4. It's been a long day and I need a full night's sleep to absorb any more of your secrets. Harry quickly nodded before suddenly becoming worried. You do realize as soon as we do this everyone will be staring at you. I do. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about that, but if you can manage it for 6 years, I suppose I can handle it for a bit as well. Suit yourself, Harry said as they started walking out of the chamber. There is one important thing we need to cover under the oath tonight, though. He looked very serious. You cannot, under any circumstance, let Hermione know Winky is now my house elf. Daphne was keenly aware of the sound of her own footsteps as she briskly made her way to the library to meet Harry. The hallway was so quiet, too quiet. This was truly her last chance to back out. She felt a bit as if she was knowingly walking toward a tornado. Not the most sensible thing to do. True to their word, Astoria and Tracy had kept the harassment to a minimum when she told them she was meeting up with Harry at the library. Their teasing was limited to Astoria commenting that Daphne might finally manage and exceeds expectations in defense with Harry's help, and Tracy noting how hard Daphne had worked to finish her schoolwork all day before her actual study session with Harry. If anything, they seemed to be very nervous for her and the attention that Harry and Daphne being together would cause. She preferred the teasing. As she entered the library, she quickly scanned the tables. And was relieved when she didn't see Harry. That meant he hadn't arrived yet or had been smart enough to get a table near the back. She then spotted a different set of Gryffindors seated nearby. Ione and Weasley's younger sister, Jenny, were seated at a nearby table. When Hermione spotted her, she smiled slightly and subtly gestured with her head toward the back. Daphne smiled and nodded in return, thankful for the assistance and the silent support. Jenny was much less pleasant. Daphne wasn't sure what homework she was working on, but whatever it was, she wasn't enjoying it at all. Daphne worried for the table as the girl seemed to be carving into it with her quill as she wrote. She made a mental note not to get on the girl's bad side. She finally found Harry all the way in the back near the restricted section. Smart boy, she mused. She was also pleased to see the other table nearby was empty. Taking baby steps into their public ruse was her preference. All they needed was one son spotting them for the news to spread throughout the castle. No need for a larger audience than necessary. He spotted her and smiled, immediately settling Daphne's nerves. Hello again, he said warmly. He looked around before continuing in a hushed tone. Ready to slay a Dark Lord? You seem disturbingly relaxed, she quietly replied as she smiled and took a seat. He shrugged and smiled again. It's the first time I can remember ever being truly in control of something in my life. It may be a flop, but at least it will be my flop. Sounds stupid, I know. Daphne immediately understood. Since she was young, her focus had always been on her family's interests. It was a tremendous blessing, but it was not uniquely her own. Not stupid at all, she replied. His smile grew as he asked, "Did you see the welcoming committee when you came in?" "Hermione," she asked. He nodded and spoke. "She volunteered to come with me and point you back here." When Hermione volunteers, it's more of an order rather than a suggestion. She seemed quite happy to be helping, reminded me of Tracy and Astoria. Your friend Jenny seemed to be in a foul mood though. He suddenly burst out laughing before quickly quieting. You mean Ginny? He became more thoughtful and continued. She really seemed bothered. She was fine earlier, maybe a bit quieter than normal. The reason suddenly became obvious. She was surprised it didn't dawn on her before. Don't suppose she's jealous to you? Her stomach became unsettled as she realized if it were true then she was on the girl's bad side. You reckon? Harry asked, looking slightly pleased. She used to fancy me, but she's got a boyfriend now. I thought she was over me. For some reason Harry being pleased annoyed Daphne. Time for a change in topic. So are we ready? Harry quickly refocused and nodded his head. So everything from here on out is covered under the oath. Agree. He waited for Daphne's nod and quickly cast a spell that she immediately recognized. You know Muffaliato. He looked stunned. You know Muffaliato. Snape teaches it to every Slytherin in first year, Daphne supplied. It's meant to be a secret, which makes me curious. How do you know it? Harry paused before replying, clearly considering something. Finally he replied, I'll tell you another time. He then pulled out 2 galleons, handing one off to Daphne. I really appreciate it, thought Harry, but the profit from the Basilisk is enough. Harry ignored her joke and tapped the coin he was still holding with his wand. The coin she was holding immediately became warm. Look at the outside of the coin, he instructed. Instead of the normal series of numbers there was a message. Carry this coin at all times. We can use these coins to send messages to each other. If you are ever in trouble or need to meet up with me, just tap the coin and think of the message you want to send, Harry supplied as her finger grazed over the words. Protean charm, she asked. This is an ingenious bit of magic, Harry. Did you think of this? He laughed. Are you mad, Hermione, then? She asked. Harry nodded in reply. She came up with them for our defense group last year. Dead handy. Smart, Daphne commented sincerely. I appreciate the caution, but are these really necessary? Yes, he replied in a tone that would brook no argument. He suddenly seemed to deflate. I promised Mys. Elf no one else will be hurt due to my carelessness. Your godfather, she commented. It wasn't a question. He nodded slightly and after a moment recovered. Yeah, but we will get to that later. Let's crack on. I'll need this back before we leave, he said seriously as he slid a piece of parchment across the table. The prophecy, she realized. Here we go, she mumbled as she took a deep breath and slowly began reading. After rereading it multiple times she spoke. As the 7th month dies, you were born on July 31st, he supplied. Mark him as his equal, she said in a hush, her eyes unconsciously drifting to Harry's forehead. Merlin, you really are the chosen one, aren't you? She finally blurted. That seems to be the consensus, he replied casually. The responsibility on his shoulders seemed unfathomable to her. It actually could have been one other person. Voldemort had narrowed it down to the 2 of us and chose to attack me first. So in a way he really did choose me. The other person is actually in our year and was born on July 30th. His parents were heavily involved in fighting Voldemort during the war and had defied him multiple times as well. Neville Longbottom, she replied unconsciously as her heart sank. Yeah, that's right, Harry confirmed. She could tell from his tone of voice that he was surprised she sorted it out so quickly. My parents were really close to Frank and Alice Longbottom, she said as her eyes suddenly began to well up. Gryffindors really were brave. It seemed they had to be merely to survive. She stared down at the parchment as Harry spoke. I know a lot of Slytherins think of him as a bit of a joke, but he's brilliant, brave. She stayed silent, remembering all at once the jokes her fellow Slytherins had made at Neville's expense over the years and the multiple times she had genuinely laughed. Are you okay? Harry asked, concern clear in his voice. She stubbornly wiped away the tear that had escaped and nodded her head, suddenly desperate to move on. Any theories on this? Power-Ease knows not. She asked. Daphne was immensely grateful when Harry didn't push her more on the Longbottoms, simply nodding before answering her question. Dumbledore reckons it's love. Voldemort doesn't understand the concept and the headmaster seems to think I'm the shining example of it. You're serious? Daphne blurted out. It just sounded so absurd. It sounds dodgy, I know, but it does make some sense. The magic my mother used to save me as a baby was based on her love for me, and there's been a couple of other times love has helped save me. Quote. She was furiously processing all of this information as Harry continued. I've recently had another idea about what it means though. The unsettled tone in his voice jolted her to attention. She looked him in the eyes and waited for him to continue. I actually think it may be you. Her first instinct was to immediately shout, no, but as the seconds went on and she thought through, she realized it could be possible. Her input was the power, and they were acting in secret. It suddenly became difficult for her to breathe. She felt a hand on her arm. It can be a bit overwhelming. Just a bit, she finally managed to mumble out. Harry removed his hand and Daphne immediately missed its presence. She had no idea how long had passed, but Harry remained silent, letting her process the implications. Slowly the weight that had settled in her chest receded and her resolve began to grow. If they really were the chosen ones, then she needed to sort herself out and help. Quote, suppose we should crack on then, shall we? She finally said with as much confidence as she could muster. He smiled and nodded. I reckon you could do with a break from prophecies for now, and I can tell you my idea. Yes, she replied immediately. She marveled at how perceptive he was, then realized he had to go through the exact same thing 7 months prior. The seriousness of the moment was broken as another student came into view. The Gryffindor, Daphne thought her name was Violet or something similar, did not immediately spot them as it appeared she was looking at the shelves of books for something specific. Daphne suppressed a snort as the girl finally spotted them and immediately stopped and stared, her eyes threatening to bulge out of her skull. Harry cancelled the Muffaliato spell and spoke. All right there, Lavender. I really need to start learning first names, Daphne mused as Lavender quickly nodded and fled from sight. Well, there is no turning back now, Harry said. Lavender is the biggest gossip in the school. Everyone is going to know about us by breakfast. Given her flair for the dramatic, I'm guessing she'll be telling people she caught us shagging in the restricted section. Ron's reaction should be interesting. In for a Canute, in for a galleon, I suppose, Daphne joked, silently thankful for the levity that Lavender had unknowingly provided. She recast the privacy spell and looked back to Harry. So your idea? Right, Harry said, still smiling at his fellow Gryffindor's sudden appearance. To begin with, this isn't just a scar, he began, pointing to his forehead. I have a connection to Voldemort. When I was around Quirrell in first year, my scar used to hurt. I didn't realize it until later, but it was being so close to Voldemort that caused it. So, met times when Voldemort is feeling angry or hurting someone, I can feel it, and he paused and suddenly looked unnerved. Sometimes I can see what's happening through his eyes when he's doing it and he's excited or enjoying it. Daphne's mind was screaming, but she forced herself to stay calm. Harry needed her to stay calm. She waited for him to continue. Voldemort didn't realize we had this connection until last year. He only knew the first bit of the prophecy and was obsessed with hearing the rest, so he started sending me messages, visions of things through the connection. At first they were visions of the Department of Mysteries where the prophecy was stored, and finally at the end of the year he sent the fake vision that my godfather was in danger there. Harry stopped talking. She could tell the weight of his actions had returned and silently vowed to carry her new coin everywhere she went. She mirrored Harry's earlier action, placing a hand on his arm and gently squeezed. The burdens he had to deal with were unfathomable and seemingly without end. She could tell he was getting lost in his thoughts and spoke. That's why you can speak Parseltongue. She was pleased to see that question had broken him out of his trance. Yeah, probably, he answered, now slightly more relaxed. It was more than a connection, she thought. It was as if he had a bit of Voldemort in him. She shuddered at the implications. There is another connection as well. This is going to sound crazy. Daphne couldn't help but chuckle. Of course, because everything you've shared so far has been perfectly normal. Fair point, he replied. Voldemort has a familiar, a huge snake. Around Christmas last year I connected to the snake. It was attacking Ron's father and it was like I was seeing it happen through the snake's eyes. And that vision was real. Not a false vision like the other ones. Harry nodded gravely. Yeah, it was actually a good thing in the end that I saw it. I was able to notify the headmaster right away and get Mr. Weasley help. If that hadn't happened no one would have known that he had been attacked. You know you hardly ever mention the people you save but you can't Stanley talk about the ones you couldn't. Harry shook his head. I didn't really save him though, he argued. I just happened to be the one who saw it. It really came down to luck. I know, Daphne interrupted. She had only really known Harry for about a week but could already predict his reactions. It wasn't exactly difficult. If praise was being doled out he avoided it. If it was blame he embraced it. So your idea has to do with this connection. Do you want to lure him into a trap like he did to you? No, he replied. He took a deep breath and continued. The pain in my scar from the sea. Connection is excruciating when it happens. It got me thinking. What if I could turn the connection around and send something the other way? You want to give Voldemort a headache, Harry? Not exactly, Harry replied. Taking another deep breath. Do you remember when you asked me why I didn't ask Hermione for help with this? He waited for her nod and continued. I told you there were 2 reasons but only gave you one at the time. The second reason is Hermione would have refused immediately based on what I have in mind. This can't be good, Daphne thought as she braced for another bombshell. I wasn't thinking of a headache spell. I was thinking more along the lines of Avada Kedavra. No, absolutely not, she blurted out, bolting from her chair so she could leave. Harry quickly grabbed her wrist. Please, let me finish. He looked so sincere and so desperate. She slowly took her seat again and nodded for him to continue. I have no clue if such a thing is possible, let alone whether there are other less permanent solutions. I need you to help prove the actual connection could potentially work like I think and maybe come up with other ideas besides Avada Kedavra. I tend to think like a blunt instrument. The simplest solution would be the killing curse but if you can come up with something different I am all ears. Let's say I decide you are right, that we could damage him through your scar. But I can't come up with something besides Avada Kedavra. You would willingly do that if that is the only option. If it's the only way and you thought it would work then yes. I would. He suddenly looked down and stared at the table. Based on prior observations she knew that the next bit would be uncomfortable for him to say. I told you I've been thinking lately about all he decisions Dumbledore has made on my behalf. There is more to it than what I shared at the time. He seems to be concerned with me surviving physically for now but not necessarily being happy or, I don't know, content. I've received no special training, anything I've learned has been down to working with Hermione or someone else, never Dumbledore. He isn't preparing me to win a fight. He is expecting me to die but needs it to be what he thinks is the right way. I think he wants me to sacrifice myself like your mother, she interrupted. She protected you with her sacrifice, her love. Exactly, he answered, sounding relieved that she understood. The only problem is I think he is too afraid or doesn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. Daphne's hatred of the Admaster seemed to be growing exponentially by the day but she needed to mask that anger for now. She needed to be calm and think for Harry. Harry could be wrong and it would be up to her to examine the facts. You seem remarkably calm for someone who is basically planning his own death, she stated. It was true. The only time he had become uncomfortable during their conversation was based on her reaction. Do you remember what you said about your sister? How you and your parents are much more troubled than she is about her dying. It's the same reason I'm okay if I have to die to end this. He was still so calm as he spoke. If you could reverse it, could sacrifice yourself and take the curse so your sister would be healthy and live a long life, you would do it. You don't need to answer. I know you would. That's what I'm willing to do. He stopped staring at the table and looked her determinedly in the eye. Too many people have already died for me and everyone just makes it harder. If I can make sure that Hermione is safe, that Ron and his family are safe, that you are safe, well that's a much better option than someone else dying so I can be safe. It would be a relief. He was right. She would have been overjoyed if she could have been cursed instead of Astoria. Once he explained his reasons, it made total sense why he would accept such a fate. She, however, did not accept it. There had to be another way. They would figure it out. She would figure it out. Daphne suddenly realized Harry had been staring at her, waiting patiently for her thoughts. Like you said, the first step will be to figure out more about this connection. Then we'll figure out something other than you getting hit with the killing curse again. One time is enough for a lifetime, I think. He smiled and nodded. I hate to be the bearer of more bad news, but I'm afraid we've missed dinner. I know a secret passage to the kitchen if you're interested. The elves are always excited to make something when I show up. Daphne nodded and began packing up her things, purposely ignoring the fact that Harry had just equated the concept of him dying to missing dinner. So are we done with the oath for tonight? She asked, praying he would say yes so they could talk about something pointless and most especially non-death related for a while. Definitely, but before we do there is just one more thing, he answered nonchalantly as he stood up. Something else you're scared of Hermione finding out about? She said with a smile. Not this time, he said through his chuckle. She's working on this bit as well actually, but hasn't been able to come up with anything. Have you ever heard the term horcrux? Daphne had been working with Harry for 3 weeks and the initial exhilaration and excitement had well and truly worn off. The endless angry, envious, confused stares she had to endure from what seemed to be the whole of Hogwarts, including the staff. And the seeming dead end she had been met with after thoroughly studying Harry's connection with Voldemort had sapped her energy. She had always worked hard at her studies, but this was different. This meant something. This was well and truly hard. She and Harry had spent almost every evening together, either tending to their own studies or with Harry reciting and re-reciting, in excruciating detail, everything he could remember from each time he connected with Voldemort. Daphne had thought about it so many times, had cross-referenced her observations against every book she could find on mind magics, and had reached a standstill. On everything she had found in the library. What Harry was experiencing was truly unprecedented. Even venturing into the restricted section using the invisibility cloak came up with no answers. She had thought it through so much she was now going in circles. Her thoughts always reverted back to 3 anomalies she could not explain. In every book she could find these sort of connections were always one way and always required a master legilmens. She had no doubt that Voldemort was a master at the craft, and if anyone could perform such an act from a significant distance it would be him. But to explain Harry accessing Voldemort's mind. There were many things she admired about Harry, but his ability to discipline his mind was not on the list. There was something beyond legilmency and occlumency going on. Excluding the false images planned by Voldemort, Harry's ability to access his thoughts were all rooted in powerful emotion, anger, rage, excitement. As much as the headmaster annoyed her these days, she thought he might have been on the right track. Beginning with his mother's sacrifice through the battle at the Department of Mysteries, Lily Potter and Harry had consistently and definitively bested Voldemort with their emotions. It was truly fascinating. Her cynical, clinical mind wanted to dispute it, but there was no other explanation. They seemed to defeat Voldemort by sheer force of will and Voldemort's complete dismissal of such a thing being possible. There had to be a way to harness that emotion. She didn't totally subscribe to Dumbledore's idea that Harry could love Voldemort to death, but there was something there to be honed and exploited. Lily Potter had done it once. She needed to do it again. Then there was the snake. Harry somehow accessing Voldemort's mind was inexplicable enough, but somehow seeing through the snake's eyes was another level of baffling. She kept going back to her original reaction when she realized Harry could speak Parseltongue. She was positive all 3 shared something. She was so close, so frustratingly close to the answer. She was broken out of her thoughts by the warming of the coin she had been twirling unconsciously in her hand. Her initial confusion turned to panic, fearing the worst for Harry's safety. She quickly read the message. Hermione has invited herself and Ron to study with us in the library, so you'll have to pretend you can stand me. She initially smiled at his joke and quickly became unsettled. This would be her first proper time around Weasley. She had seen him evaluating her multiple times since she and Harry had started dating. He hadn't seemed angry, just thoughtful. Based on her observations over the years and Hermione's scathing comments about the boy the last couple of weeks, this seemed to be uncharacteristic behavior. She could have handled the emotions on his sleeve, Weasley she was used to seeing, but this thinking, considerate Weasley unnerved her. She was pleasantly surprised so far at how well she had handled the mumbled insults levied her way. Even the ones from her own housemates hadn't fazed her. She hated to admit it, but Harry's friends were different. She wanted them to like her. She found them in the back sitting at their table. Hermione was muttering under her breath to Weasley, a look of unbridled fury on her face. Ron appeared unfazed, which seemed to be infuriating her even more. Harry just looked tired. Daphne got the impression that he had been sitting through some version of this for the last 6 years. "Daphne!" Harry exclaimed, a relieved expression coming over his face. To her complete and utter surprise, he quickly leapt from his chair and embraced her. "This is new," she mused, not displeased in the least. He whispered in her ear. "You have no idea how happy I am to see you. They've been at each other's throats all day and it's doing my head in. They just need to get on with it and shag or something." She snorted at his joke and noticed Hermione's expression lighten. All traces of her previous anger gone. Weasley was looking at her as well, thinking. It was unnerving. Harry seemed to realize what he was doing and pulled back, an embarrassed expression on his face. She grabbed his hand and gave it a gentle squeeze of assurance. "Glad to see you've missed me since yesterday, Harry," she said purposely loud enough for everyone else to hear. Harry relaxed. Hermione beamed. Weasley just sat there, evaluating. After a bit of small talk, the next 2 hours passed uneventfully as Daphne devoted time to catching up on her normal studies. He was slogging through her ancient runes translations when she heard Hermione speaking to Harry. Needing a bit of help then. She looked to see that Harry had pulled out a textbook. A very worn textbook by the looks of it. Must be potions, she mused as it did not look familiar to her. Her potions education had mercifully ended after the required 5 years. She had managed an outstanding on Owls but had no interest in continuing her instruction under Snape. She had been furious when she learned he had taken over defense and would be stuck with him for at least another year. "Not now, Hermione," Harry spat out. Harry had mentioned that he and Hermione had been arguing more than usual this year, and it appeared she was about to witness it firsthand. Hermione opened her mouth to speak but was cut off forcefully by Harry. "I said not now, Hermione." Hermione closed her mouth but leveled Harry with a glare not quite as fierce as the one previously directed at Weasley. Ron seemed prepared to speak before Hermione cut in. "Not a word, Ronald. I'm sick of you making excuses for." "Excuse us," Harry said angrily as he stood and quickly pulled Hermione from the table and into the stacks. She suddenly realized she and Weasley were alone. "Best to get this over with. It's clear you have something to say to me. I'd appreciate it if you would just get on with it. I hope it's not out something stupid like me being a Slytherin." Her question seemed to take him by surprise. Eventually he recovered and spoke. "I may have already raised those concerns to Harry." Hermione then shared with me, in excruciating detail, how stupid that sort of comment was and how much she trusted you as well. "I'm actually a bit worried she may have put a hex on me that activates if I call you a SN, the S word that rhymes with cake." "I'm not joking," he assured her as Daphne raised her eyebrows. He took a breath and continued. "Look, Greengrass. I prefer Daphne," she interrupted. "Look, Daphne," he began again. "Based on what Harry and Hermione have said, you seem to be all right. If they trust you, that's good enough for me." She could tell there was something he still wanted to say. "But," she prompted, "even though I don't think it's true, there is a chance you are." "I don't know," musing Harry. She began to speak but he lifted his hand for her to stop. "I'm not finished. Harry is a good bloke, a great bloke. He's been through a lot and deserves to be happy, so just don't take advantage. If you are just playing around, I'm asking you to do it with someone else." She nodded her head, relieved that she had passed Ron's test, even if it was provisional. "Right," he continued, now grinning. "You wouldn't happen to have finished the Transfiguration essay due tomorrow, have you? Hermione already warned me you'd try this at some point, so I'm sorry to say you're on your own." "Everyone is conspiring against me," he mumbled as he smiled and shook his head, returning to his work. Daphne laughed. "Any idea what that was about?" she asked as he gestured toward where the pair had disappeared. Hermione being insane. I'll let Harry tell you about it. I don't want to risk her hearing me siding with Harry again. They worked in silence for several minutes before Harry returned and purposely began packing his bag. Fancy a walk? He asked her as a worried-looking Hermione came into view. Yeah, she replied as she quickly packed up. Harry, please don't, Hermione blurted. Ready? Harry interrupted as he grabbed Daphne's hand and pulled her toward the exit. She gave Hermione an apologetic look as they disappeared from sight. They walked for several minutes in silence, still holding hands. She could feel and sense Harry gradually relaxing and waited for him to speak. Eventually he pulled her into an empty classroom that was thankfully portrait-free and collapsed into a nearby chair. Sorry about that, he muttered. It's really no problem, Harry. What's going on? She could tell Harry did not like arguing with his friends. He handed her the worn textbook she had spotted before. This is what's going on. She scanned through the book and quickly realized virtually every page had been written on. Whole passages had been marked through and handwritten notes filled the margins. Whoever this book belonged to originally is a potions genius. I've followed his revised instructions all year and my potions grade has soared. Hermione has decided it's cheating and won't shut up about it. Well, that's stupid, she blurted. She looked up from the book to see RRY was visibly relieved at her reaction. Thank you, he enthused. She is just so competitive and so stubborn sometimes. I'm not sure why, but her making that comment in front of you just hit a nerve. He calmed down and continued. Seriously, thank you. Even if you disagreed with me, I value your opinion. Harry continued, emboldened by her agreement. I've learned a few spells in there too. This book is how I knew Muffaliato. Suppose it was Snape's book? She asked. Nah, that was my first thought when you mentioned how he taught it to you, but the prince is a much better teacher than Snape will ever be. Prince. Harry grabbed the book and turned it to a page in the front before handing it back. The Half-Blood Prince, she read aloud. He's a bit dramatic. Are you sure it isn't Snape? Harry shrugged. If he is, he's helped me loads more as a student than he ever has as a professor. Daphne continued scanning the book and came across what looked to be a spell written in the margins. Levicorpus, what's that one do? Harry seemed to become uncomfortable. It hangs someone by their leg in the air. She kept reading the scribblings and did not see where that was listed. Idiot, she mused. It doesn't say anything about what it does in the book. How did you sort that out? He was most definitely uncomfortable now. I tried it. But there was no harm done. It hit Ron, who was in bed at the time. Well, as stupid as Hermione is being about using it to improve your potions, trying any spell without knowing what it does is incredibly stupid. And on one of your friends. What am I saying? Doing it on anyone is irresponsible. That's what Hermione said. At that moment he reminded Daphne of a kicked puppy. Still value my opinion? She asked. Yes, he answered immediately. I'm not sure why, but it sounded much more reasonable coming from you. Maybe because you agreed about the potions bit. He smiled despite himself. Quickly he snapped to attention. I almost forgot, he said briskly as he pulled a wrapped box out of his bag. Happy birthday, he blurted as he handed her the box. My birthday was last week, Harry, she said, trying to suppress a smile, and you weren't meant to know. She had tried to keep it from him because she knew he would want to do the noble thing and get her something. I know, but I only found out about it a few days ago. I want Ted to thank you for your help, and I needed something for Winky to do, so you're really doing me a favor. Besides, what kind of a fake boyfriend would I be if I forgot my fake girlfriend's birthday? Quote, that is some seriously flawed reasoning, but I love presents, so I will let it go. As she started opening the box, Harry spoke, a hint of nervousness in his voice. We've never really talked about your hobbies, so I thought I'd get you something practical. She opened the box to find a Muggle fountain pen. It was nice. Simple but nice. It's actually a self-inking quill meant to look like a fountain pen. I thought it would be useful since your family does so much business with Muggles. It's brilliant, she interrupted, touched by his thoughtfulness. Thank you. She sat down across from Harry, still looking at the gift. I like Muggle music, she said softly. What? One of my hobbies. I picked it up from my mum. The new music players don't work so well around magic, but phonographs are pretty easy to enchant. And I have a wireless that picks up Muggle broadcasts as well. I miss listening to it when I'm at school. The Weird Sisters are fine, but it gets a bit tiring when every song is about magic. She looked up to see him smiling at her again, that genuine smile he seemed to be sharing with her more often. I've always wanted to try baking, he shared. She laughed. You're joking. He shrugged his shoulders. One of my chores when I'm at my relatives is to cook, but it's always been basic meals. I'd like to try it for fun, proper baking. Biscuits, pastries, pies, it seems like it would be relaxing. Daphne stayed quiet, willing him to share more. My aunt likes to watch baking shows on Muggle television. Sometimes when my uncle wasn't home she would let me watch with her. I was younger then, 6 or 7. She didn't dislike me as much then. She had realized early on in their discussions that Harry purposely avoided mentioning his relatives and was pleased to see him opening up more, even if just a bit. Why haven't you tried it? Based on how you've described your cousin, he would eat it as quick as you could make it. They have an aversion to messes and an aversion to me enjoying things, so I've never risked it. He said it so matter-of-factly, not wanting sympathy or pity. It was normal to him. Daphne's blood boiled. Well, once we're done sorting out your problem, you can come visit this summer. You can make me a cake and listen to Beatles records with me. Chocolate with buttercream icing, I think. It's a date, he replied without a trace of belly. In his voice that it would ever actually happen. It was as if he had given up ever getting his hopes up for anything nice to happen, no matter how small. She silently vowed to someday have Harry make her a rubbish cake. She would lie through her teeth about how good it was and eat every bite offered. The responsible part of Daphne kicked in as she remembered there were a few things she needed to cover about their project. It was easy to let herself get distracted around Harry, but she forced herself into action. Grudgingly she changed the topic. Can we spend a bit of time under the oath and make some plans? If we miss dinner we could maybe make a run to the kitchen. Absolutely, he replied. Hermione and I could use a break from each other anyway. Besides, I like our trips to the kitchen, Miss Greenie. Damn Dobby, she muttered to herself as she cast Muffaliato. Anyway, has Hermione made any progress on horcruxes? No, he replied, frustration evident in his voice. She's looked at everything she can find. I think I've gone over everything about your connection that I can based on what's available at Hogwarts. It's time we take my parents up on their offer. They have access to some darker reference material that may help. We can ask them about horcruxes as well. He nodded his head. Time to meet the in-laws. Idiot, she muttered as her stomach flipped. She stubbornly ignored it as she looked back at her gift. Thanks to wizarding tradition they can easily justify a visit now that you're courting me. Is it weird that I'm suddenly nervous? She laughed. No need to worry. Based on what I've told them they think you're brilliant. Just do me a favor and try to pretend you care when my father discusses his progress with the Basilisk. I knew there would be a catch, he joked. She was nervous to ask the next question but felt she owed it to Harry. So are you okay with telling them everything? My father is very shrewd. If he really wanted to divulge something that could make you vulnerable, he could probably figure out a way. He would never do that though, right? Never. Then they get to know everything. Even the prophecy. Yes. Daphne smiled. They quickly formulated a plan. Daphne would write to her parents and request another meeting on Saturday. It would be simple to justify Harry's absence from the castle to meet Daphne's parents. If Dumbledore protested, they could easily cite Harry's status as the Potter heir and wizarding courting traditions to shut him up. They had finished in time to make dinner in the Great Hall, but both agreed the kitchen was a better option. As they made their way down the hall, Daphne was roused out of her thoughts by Harry tugging on her elbow to stop. He quickly recast Muffaliato and spoke. He looked nervous. I know we don't really have anything to work on until we meet with your parents, but I was hoping we could, keep studying together. Her stomach lurched again and she replied. Well, I study with Hermione on Mondays and I need to spend some time with Tracy and Astoria as well, but yes. Definitely. She vaguely realized she was twirling the coin in her pocket again. Maybe we could study one night together with them too. They'd like to meet you. Yes, he replied, releasing a breath as they started walking again. Checkers, not chess, Daphne repeated in her mind as she let go of the coin and took Harry's hand instead. She could feel Harry tense initially, but he quickly relaxed, giving her hand a gentle squeeze as they continued walking. She was rapidly becoming a fan of checkers. In the end, she realized, it all came down to who you decided to play with. Daphne had made the mistake of stopping by the Hufflepuff table at breakfast the next morning to set up a time for her sister to properly meet Harry. Her plan of meeting quietly in the library, perhaps Wednesday or Thursday, went up in flames immediately. What about tonight? Her sister had quickly countered. And why would I want to meet him to study? In the library. I'd actually like to talk to him. We can cast a privacy spell, and I can't meet tonight anyway as I'm studying with her, someone else. Astoria sighed dramatically as she pushed herself up from the table. Why do you have to make things so complicated? She drawled and began walking over to the Gryffindor table. She was walking directly toward where Harry was seated. Everything seemed to slow down as she watched her sister tap Harry on the shoulder and begin talking to him. Astoria pointed to her and Harry smiled and nodded. Astoria waved goodbye brightly, quickly making her way back beside Daphne. It's all sorted. You and Harry are going to sit with me at lunch today. See? Simple. You said you weren't going to tease me about Harry. Daphne grit out as she took a bite of food, purposely avoiding looking toward the Gryffindor table. This isn't teasing, Daphne. This is me helping you, as I always do, get out of your head. Harry didn't care. He actually looked pleased. You worry too much. Astoria was never more irritating than when she used logic and reason. She chanced a glance at Harry to see that he was watching them and seemed to be highly amused. She subtly stuck out her tongue, causing Harry to spit out what he was drinking. She did her best to ignore Ginny frowning a few seats away. She was definitely on the girl's bad side. Fine, she stubbornly replied. Just don't be an idiot. Oh, don't worry, Daphne. I have many well-thought-out questions and insights for your boyfriend. Okay, that bit was teasing. Then she immediately dug into her breakfast, a smug expression on her face. Idiot, Daphne muttered as she punched her sister discreetly under the table. As she left her transfiguration class with Tracy that morning, she was surprised to see Harry leaning against the wall, apparently waiting for her. You seemed a bit worried about eating lunch with your sister today. Thought I'd walk with you, he said simply. Hi Harry. See you tomorrow night, she heard Tracy say and looked to see her walking quickly down the hall so they could be alone. Harry waved and nodded uncertainly. So I guess we are studying with Tracy tomorrow night. Good. Don't you have charms right now? She asked, suddenly embarrassed at inadvertently revealing she had memorized Harry's schedule. Embarrassment vanished as she realized Harry had apparently memorized her schedule as well. I told Flitwick my scar was itching and he let me leave early. After I collapsed taking my OWL exam last year, I think all the teachers are terrified I could drop dead at any moment in their class. Well, everyone but Snape. She ignored Harry making another nonchalant joke about his death and spoke. I'm sorry about all this, she said with a sigh as they began walking down the hall. I didn't mean for my sister to ambush you like that. He nudged her on the shoulder and spoke. You and I have entirely different ideas of what constitutes an ambush. It was fine, everything is fine. She knew he was right. She was worrying about nothing. It was nice to hear him say it though. They remained silent as they made their way to lunch. Harry's words had calmed her until they neared the Great Hall and she could hear the rumbling conversations of the students on the other side. This was the first time they would be together. In public. In front of an audience. A few nosy people staring at them in the library was one thing. This was something entirely different. She felt Harry take her hand as he began to speak. Everyone might stop talking for a moment when we walk in together, but it will feel much quieter and seem to last longer than it really is. Just focus on your sister while you are walking and everyone will move on. Trust me, it isn't a big deal. She did as he instructed and it played out exactly as he predicted. It was fine. Everything was fine. Astoria had saved 2 spaces directly across from where she was and they quickly took a seat. Hi Harry. It's good to see you again, Astoria greeted. Again? Daphne asked. Astoria rolled her eyes and replied. How do you think he found out it was your birthday? I waited for you to do it, should have known you wouldn't. Harry laughed. Yeah, thanks for that. Daphne felt him pat her leg encouragingly. In spite of her best efforts to worry for no reason, she relaxed. Astoria turned her gaze to Harry. You know you're supposed to be making Daphne a bit more exciting, but apparently she is making you more boring. A pen. Really? I think it's brilliant. Daphne interjected. And it's not just a pen, it's a self-inking quill meant to look like a pen. Daphne looked at Harry and could tell that her sister had immediately put him at ease. She wished she knew how Astoria managed it so easily. Oh, I take it all back. I didn't realize it was really a self-inking quill. Apology accepted, Harry joined in. Besides, exciting is highly overrated. I will take boring whenever I can. It was meant as a joke for her sister, but Daphne knew it was the truth. Daphne smirked as she realized Astoria had no idea how much excitement Harry had provided. After several minutes of light conversation, Astoria leaned in, speaking in a slightly lower volume. I promise I won't ask about all the rumors about you, but I do have one question. Merlin, here we go, Daphne muttered, causing Harry to laugh. Astoria stuck her tongue out at Daphne, then continued. To Daphne's surprise, Astoria looked